Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with the review of the United Arab Emirates. May I draw your attention to the reports on which the review is based, and in accordance with Resolution 5/1, the National Report, the compilation report as prepared by the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, and a summary of stakeholders' information. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammed Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of the United Arab Emirates, to introduce the report. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the United Arab Emirates, I am honored to return to Geneva to discuss the progress we have made in implementing the recommendations from our first Universal Periodic Review in 2008. With my colleagues, I thank the countries that participated in the working group for our review and the Troika of Germany, Thailand, and Ethiopia. I would like to convey to all of you who are here today the warm greetings of the people of the United Arab Emirates. At the outset, let me express the UAE's appreciation for the review process and the opportunity it gives us to have this open dialogue with the international community. The UPR process represents a beacon for the cause of human rights worldwide. The dialogue we are having in Geneva today presents an unparalleled opportunity for us to promote a transparent and inclusive approach to human rights. It's an opportunity we fully embrace and value. Mr. President, it is my pleasure to introduce our delegation, which is comprised of several officials who have very ably supported the compilation of a report on human rights in the UAE. Our delegation also includes members from civil society groups who were involved in the preparation of this report. Since the 2008 UPR, the UAE government has made it a priority to put into practice the outcomes of the review. In 2010, we set up a committee specifically to support the objective of ensuring that we are following through on our commitments under the UPR. The committee is comprised of government bodies, both federal and local, and advisors from civil society organizations. It now acts as a permanent forum for the consultative process with civil society in the UAE. The committee developed a plan to implement the outcome of the review, working closely with a host of national actors. Feedback on a draft of the plan was sought from government ministries, civil society associations, and our National Assembly, the Federal National Council. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our own civil society for their contribution to the review. Their participation was a centerpiece of our UPR process. In the course of consultations and engagement they had with the committee over the last 2 years, our citizens and civil society organizations have shared their views on human rights in the UAE. Much of this input is reflected in the report. Following our last consultative meeting with civil society, the draft report was put on the committee's website in order to enable all our citizens to participate in the discussion about advancing human rights in the UAE. The final national report was submitted to the Human Rights Council in October 2012, but our dialogue with civil society and other stakeholders in the UAE continues. Mr. President, this report demonstrates the efforts the UAE has made to implement the findings of the review and the continuous progress we are making. During the UAE's first review, many countries put forward questions regarding the UAE's human rights record. Recommendations were made covering a wide range of human rights issues, including the ratification of international human rights treaties, national implementation of human rights commitments, the rights of workers, and the rights of women and children. The UAE government accepted 36 recommendations and made 9 additional voluntary pledges. More than 90% of these were implemented. Details of the actions we took are in the report, which provides a specific response to each recommendation. In the course of this intervention, I would like to discuss a few thematic areas that these recommendations covered and review some of the significant progress that has occurred during the last 4 years. Mr. President, the UAE has a stable political system characterized by a consultative relationship between its citizens and its government, the application of the rule of law and good governance. This is underpinned by a constitution which guarantees the rights of UAE citizens. The UAE's political system has evolved over time in response to the needs of a modern nation state while staying consistent with its traditions. We take pride in our achievements, but we are never satisfied with the status quo. Let me be clear, we are facing challenges. I will not stand here in front of you and say that we have a spotless record in the UAE. Indeed, I am not aware of any country that does. In a difficult and unstable region and in a country with a rapidly growing population, a large percentage of whom are expatriates, our approach to human rights is inevitably an evolving one. What we do have is a strong commitment to improve the situation. I can assure you that the UAE government takes concerns of any possible violation of human rights very seriously, and that we are constantly working on strengthening our capacity to respond to these. We will continue to take this proactive approach in a way that is consistent with our Constitution, laws, and traditions to address or prevent situations which threaten or violate human rights. Mr. President, it is a central duty of any government to ensure that it has adequate legislation and institutions in place to ensure the rights of its people are protected. Since the first UPR, the UAE has comprehensively reviewed its constitution and laws in order to implement systems that effectively protect human rights. This process entailed undertaking significant reforms, details of which are in the report. Allow me, though, to highlight a few developments in this regard. The UAE Constitution was amended in 2009. Among other changes, the tenure of the Federal National Council members was extended to 4 years in order to allow its members to complete a comprehensive term of parliamentary work. This is in line with international parliamentary standards. The remit of the FNC has also now been expanded to include a role in debating international treaties and international conventions undertaken by the government. During recent years, the UAE has also implemented diverse legislative initiatives to address other human rights issues, including the enactment of several measures to strengthen the rights of workers and the amendment of legislation on the rights of people with disabilities. The UAE accepted 2 recommendations on protecting children's rights at the last review, and as a result, we are in the process of adopting a federal law concerning children's rights. The law includes a number of measures that are designed to protect children and prescribes penalties for breaching its provisions. More details related to the progress of human rights legislation in the UAE are set out in our report. The UAE also understands the importance of promoting institutional frameworks that aim to strengthen the protection of human rights. As our report shows, several departments and government entities concerned with human rights have been established at both federal and domestic levels during the past few years. A group of recommendations that we received during the first review, as well as questions submitted in advance of this session by the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, concerned the establishment of a national human rights institution in the UAE. We remain committed to taking this recommendation forward and have taken a series of important steps in order to realize it. Mr. President, a number of recommendations in 2008 called on the UAE government to do more to ratify treaties and other international instruments. We appreciate that our engagement with the international community in the field of human rights must be multifaceted, including studying the accession to international conventions, cooperating with treaty bodies and special procedures, undertaking the UPR, and cooperating with the activities of the Human Rights Council. On each of these levels, the UAE has done much to comply with internationally accepted standards. The UAE has acceded to various international conventions, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the Convention on Rights of Children, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, whose optional protocol we signed in 2010, and the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, and the Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children. The UAE also recently joined the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, formally acceding to the Convention last July. We will also continue the process of joining the optional protocols on child involvement in armed conflicts and the optional protocol on child exploitation and pornography. We continue to review and actively consider ratification of other international human rights instruments. Acknowledging the vital role that this cooperation plays in advancing human rights, the UAE welcomes visits by special rapporteurs in accordance with its customary practice and international commitments. In October 2009, the UAE received the UN Special Rapporteur on the sale of children, child prostitution, and child pornography, and the UN Special Rapporteur on racism and racial discrimination. In April 2012, the UAE received a visit from the United Nations Special Rapporteur on trafficking in persons. In the second quarter of 2013, the UAE will host the United Nations Working Group on Business and Human Rights. The working group offers an invaluable service by assembling the world's largest business-focused team of human rights specialists. Mr. President, the UAE's status as an attractive place to work for people from around the world has led it to become a major recipient of foreign labor, which benefits both foreign workers and the UAE. The UAE has an extensive strategy for safeguarding the rights of workers and improving their work and living conditions. This is a matter of national interest as well as a human rights issue, as foreign workers are our development partners and their contribution to the growth of our economy is invaluable. We are fully committed to the goal of strengthening the rights of workers so that they can enjoy opportunity in the UAE free of any form of abuse or exploitation. We have undertaken a series of measures that create more flexibility and freedom in the labor market. These include regulations protecting the rights of workers in case of disputes with employers and providing access to litigation processes, measures guaranteeing decent and safe accommodation for workers, and provisions regarding medical care and rights for workers to move from one job to another without time limitations. The UAE has also entered into a series of memoranda of understanding with major labor exporting countries, including India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, China, and the Philippines, designed to facilitate efforts to protect workers from exploitation. Ensuring the fair and on-time protection of workers remains a critical priority for labor policy enforcement. A new wage protection system introduced in 2009 helps to ensure that this objective is met by facilitating the transfer of salaries to workers via authorized banks and exchange companies. One notable feature of the system is that it allows the Ministry of Labor to monitor the process of transferring salaries through a comprehensive database. As a result, 3.5 million workers in more than 215,000 enterprises are ensured payment protection. As mentioned earlier, the government adopted general standards related to workers' residencies and access to amenities. These stress the responsibility of employers to provide a suitable residency for workers that is in line with internationally approved standards. It is based on these standards that the UAE continues to work on the construction of residential worker cities. Currently, there are 21 such cities in the UAE which host approximately 345,000 workers. Importantly, the government has recently approved a new law to protect domestic workers, which will be issued this year and will afford them far greater protection and assurances. This new law particularly benefits women who make up a major portion of this segment of the workforce. The UAE has worked hard to protect the rights of the different communities that contribute to the country's growth and development. For example, the rights to practice religion freely is firmly protected. This is why the UAE has numerous mosques, churches, Hindu temples, and other places of worship for the diverse population of workers that reside here. Mr. President, it is always a pleasure for me to talk about women's rights because I have seen that great things that can be achieved by women when they are given the opportunity. A few years ago, the Prime Minister of the UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, famously observed, "A place without women is a place without spirit." Indeed, without a large number of women in leadership positions, the UAE would have greatly lacked in creativity and confidence. Women now occupy 30% of higher leadership and decision-making positions in the UAE and participate meaningfully in every facet of civic and political life. In addition, in December 2012, the UAE Cabinet made it compulsory for corporations and government agencies to include women on their boards of directors. Just last week, the UAE made history when a woman chaired a session of the Federal National Council for the first time ever. In 2011, the same woman, Dr. Amal Ghubaisi, was the first woman to be elected as the FNC's deputy speakers. 7 women now serve in the FNC, and the UAE now has female federal judges. Women also occupy 2/3 of the jobs in federal government, 2/3 of the jobs in federal government, one of the highest percentages worldwide. There are 4 female ministers in the federal cabinet, which is one of the highest ratios in the Arab world. Women occupy 75% of positions in education and health sectors. Women are major contributors to the UAE economy. Official statistics indicate that Business Women Council in the UAE has more than 12,000 members who run more than 11,000 commercial ventures with an estimated value of $3.4 billion. Women also occupy more than 1/3 of the jobs in banking and finance, one of the major economic sectors in the country. 95% of female high school graduates go on to pursue higher education, as do 80% of their male counterparts. Currently, 75% of all graduates from UAE universities are women. Women in the UAE work in jobs that are not considered traditional jobs for women in a conservative Muslim society. For example, women have been certified as fighter pilot in our Air Force. In 2011, the UAE took another important step in cementing the rights of women when the President, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, issued a decree addressing the issue of children born to Emirati women but whose father is not Emirati. It accords them citizenship rights, and at the age of 18 they have the choice of taking UAE nationality or retaining the father's nationality. It is not surprising then that according to the United Nations Gender Inequality Index for 2011, the UAE ranked as the 38th most gender equal country in the world and one of the most gender equal Arab countries. The UAE's election to the membership of the Executive Council of UN Women for a 3-year term from 2013 to 2015 is a clear indication of the international community's confidence in the UAE's achievement in this field. Women's empowerment is something the UAE continues to be proud of, but our work does not end here. The government is taking the implementation of recommendations on women's rights very seriously and is in the process of adopting a national strategy for the advancement of women for 2013 to 2017. Mr. President, the UAE is committed to the global effort to combat human trafficking and is taking a lead on this issue regionally. It was the first country in the Arab world to enact a comprehensive anti-trafficking law. Remarkable progress was made between 2007 and 2012 on the UAE's 4-part anti-trafficking strategy, which focused on developing legislation and regulations relating to human trafficking, guiding the relevant authorities towards implementing preventive and deterrent measures, securing protection and support for the victims of these crimes, and promoting regional and international cooperation to combat human trafficking. With a view to raising awareness about human trafficking and building the capacity of law enforcement officers to tackle this heinous crime, the UAE National Committee on Countering Human Trafficking has organized a series of training courses and workshops during the last 4 years, involving various government agencies and institutions concerned with the welfare of victims of human trafficking. Other highlights of the UAE's anti-trafficking activities in recent years include an expanded media campaign to enhance public awareness about the crime of human trafficking, a strategy to combat all forms of forced labor through the imposition of high fines, and an expansion in the number of shelters for women and children who are victims of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. These shelters provide care for victims of human trafficking in line with the highest international standards. Furthermore, the UAE Cabinet strengthened the National Committee to Combat Human Trafficking and submitted for ratification an amendment to Federal Law number 51 on combating human trafficking in order to bring it in line with the Palermo Protocol. Mr. President, at the last review, the UAE committed itself to continue to provide foreign aid to developing countries. The UAE continues to be one of the most generous Arab donor countries. In 2011, the UAE disbursed a total of $2.1 billion in grants and loans to development, humanitarian, and charity programs worldwide. These funds have been provided to more than 120 countries. We all continue to be at the forefront of efforts to alleviate the humanitarian and development challenges faced by other states. One other recommendation asked the UAE to devote particular attention to organizing workshops focused on spreading human rights principles among law enforcement authorities in exchange of combating terrorism. Both the UAE Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Justice have held seminars and training courses for law enforcement officers to ensure that human rights and the rule of law are protected when counterterrorism measures are taken. Another group of recommendations that we accepted concerned the development of infrastructure in remote areas of the UAE. Major progress has been achieved in this area since then, and this commitment is being honored. A series of government initiatives with an estimated cost of $4.4 billion have contributed to the development of housing, water and electricity utilities, roads and bridges, and hospitals and healthcare centers in remote areas of the UAE. Mr. President, allow me to say a few words by way of closing. While we recognize that the UAE will continually need to review and enhance its efforts to protect people's human rights, the level of protection of human rights already achieved represents a significant success. 2 months ago, we celebrated our 41st anniversary as a nation. We're a young country, but one that continues to be proud of the progress it has made in a short time. According to the UN Human Development Index, the UAE has the highest level of human development in the Arab world. We take pride in the fact that the people of the UAE have a high level of well-being, that ours is a tolerant and multicultural society in a region that has long been beset by multiple and complex challenges, that the empowerment of women has been one of our notable success stories, that all citizens have a right to education and access to health care, that we are pioneers in promoting sustainable development and clean energy, and that people from over 200 nationalities residing in the UAE worship freely in churches, temples and mosques. There is no doubt that the turbulence in the Arab world and the last 2 years has presented all countries in the region with extraordinary challenges. Within this context, the UAE has worked to maintain its stability and security, to protect the progressive nature of our society, and to prevent extremism from gaining a foothold. Every country has to find the right balance between preserving civil liberties and maintaining national security. This is not always easy, especially in volatile and rapidly changing contexts. The UAE has not shied away from its responsibility to protect national security, but it has done so and will continue to do so strictly within the framework of our Constitution, our laws and our judicial practices while respecting international human rights principles. Mr. President, the UAE's progress has not always come easy, but we have worked hard to set new standards in the protection of human rights, and we will continue to do so. At the same time, we acknowledge the remaining challenges and reiterate our resolve to meet them, based on the bedrock principle that government must act with fairness and equity to protect the rights of people. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about the importance we attach to human rights in the UAE. We do hope that our response today fully demonstrates the UAE's commitment both to human rights and to multilateral engagement through the UPR. Mr. President, that ends my statement, but allow me to turn now briefly to answer some of the questions that we received in advance of this session. I feel that in my statement I have already answered two of the questions, one from the United Kingdom asking about the dialogue that we have had with civil society and our plans for continuing that dialogue, and one from Sweden asking about what measure the UAE has taken to protect the rights of contract workers, including domestic workers. I would, of course, be happy to take any further questions that colleagues have on these issues, but I will focus now on answering 3 or 4 of the other questions that we received in advance before opening the discussion for further questions. We had a question from the UK and the Netherlands about our plans for establishing a National Human Rights Commission. As mentioned in my statement, we are currently looking into this possibility. We have done some significant work on this, and we are continuing our work, and we recognize the importance of setting the National Human Rights Commission body, and we have done some significant groundwork on this, and this is one of our goals in the coming period. We've also had a question from the UK and Sweden, and they asked a question about what we are doing to protect freedom of expression in the UAE, including in the context of the Internet. The UAE is committed to preserving the freedom of expression. Chapter 3 of the UAE's constitution contains a number of provisions guaranteeing the protection of fundamental freedoms and rights. Article 30 of the UAE's constitution guarantees the freedom of expression within the limits of the law. There are currently in the UAE 16 Arabic and English newspapers published. More than 1,400 media companies work freely in Dubai Media City, many of them international companies, including 60 TV broadcasting companies and more than 120 publication houses. The UAE is top ranked among Arab states in terms of Twitter and Facebook user. A new federal law on media activities is on the way to becoming law. A set of principles related to freedom of opinion have been included in the new bill. The law was developed in consultation with groups of experts, including the journalist associations, media organizations, civil society, and academics. This new law will allow the media to have access to information flows, prevent censorship and the closing down of media outlets or withdrawal of their licenses for the protracted periods of time, and protect journalists from being required to disclose their sources or being made subject to penalties involving deprivation of liberty. All countries must seek a balance between public and social order, national security and civil liberties. It is not always easy, but it has to be done. The UAE has done that through its legitimate legislative process. In August 2012, the UAE enacted a law on combating cyber crimes that addresses many of the threats to human rights, freedoms, and personal integrity arising from the use of or misuse of the Internet, which has been a matter of concern to responsible governments around the world. While this law has been the subject of some criticism, particularly with respect to fears about restrictions on the freedom of speech, some critics have sought to condemn entirely the sensible and well-balanced content of the law by distorting its provisions. The UAE remains committed to freedom of expression and welcomes constructive debate on how best to achieve that in a way that protects other important rights and freedoms. Both the United Kingdom and Mexico asked about the implementation of the Convention Against Torture and whether we will be joining the optional protocol to the Convention. As I mentioned in my statement, the UAE formally acceded to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment in July 2012. Even though the UAE has only joined the Convention a few months ago, significant progress has already been made to implement it. I would like to highlight two aspects in particular. People can now call the Ministry of Interior toll-free to file complaints and suggestions. A text messaging service is also available for individuals with special needs. Secondly, the UAE has spread a human rights culture among law enforcement agencies, for example, by integrating the principles of human rights into the curricula of police colleges and academies, and including these concepts in their education plan. A total of 113 training courses were organized in police colleges and academies during the 2009-2012 period to do with the subject. The EU is developing a law for punitive and correctional institutions to align them with international laws guaranteeing the rights of inmates and protecting them from all forms of abuse. The public prosecution is currently monitoring punitive establishment to review the conditions of inmates and listen to any complaints from them. The punitive establishments law will include provisions on the rights of inmates, provisions of health care and preservation of social and cultural rights. With regards to whether we will join the optional protocol to the Convention, we continue to review and actively consider its ratification as well as the ratification of other international human rights instruments. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency for the statement and for his presence with us this afternoon. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before giving the floor to delegations for their questions and comments, I would like to remind you to respect the established speaking time of 1 minute and 23 seconds. 1 minute and 23 seconds, in order to accommodate all inscribed speakers. Now, I will give the floor to first speaker on my list, distinguished representative of Armenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Armenia thanks the delegation of the United Arab Emirates for their national report and the presentation today by His Excellency Mohammed Gargash. We commend all efforts for strengthening the cooperation between the United Arab Emirates and international human rights mechanisms. Particularly, we took note of the visit of High Commissioner of Human Rights and of Special Rapporteurs on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance, and the positive approach of your country. Armenia supports the government of United Arab Emirates in its strong commitment to the education and capacity building among the population. We appreciate all steps to insert human rights concept into the program of compulsory education and all other governmental initiatives. We acknowledge the progress made for the promotion of rights of women, such as the establishment of the national strategy for the advancement and empowerment of women and for the standardization of national framework with international treaties such as Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and Millennium Development Goals. Armenia recommends to United Arab Emirates to consider ratifying the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and second, to consider adoption of specific legislation on racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Thank you.
Thanks, representative of Armenia. Now I give the floor to distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President. In 2008, the UAE voluntarily pledged to study the establishment of an independent national human rights institution. We welcome the recent approval by the UAE Federal National Council of the creation of a permanent human rights committee. Could the delegation of the UAE inform us on the composition, mandate, and oversight of this human rights committee, as well as the remaining steps and deadlines for its establishment? Canada recommends that the UAE, 1. Continue to strengthen labor laws by implementing the provisions of the June 2011 ILO treaty that extends key labor protection to domestic workers. 2. Continue to introduce amendments to its national family law to ensure equal status and rights for women in all matters. 3. Continue to take steps to uphold freedom of expression by reviewing restrictive articles of its recent cybercrime law and consider updating the 1980 media law. We recommend that the new legislation be aligned with Article 19 of the ICCPR. We welcome the steps taken by the UAE to introduce legislations, policies and memorandums to ensure migrant workers' rights, as well as improve their working and living conditions. Canada also recognizes the important work done by the UAE to empower women and promote values of equality, including the 2012 decree allowing Emirati women married to foreigners to pass the citizenship to their children once they are of legal age. Canada commends the UAE on measures taken to improve and promote human rights. Canada would also like to highlight the work done by the UAE to respect international refugee protection standards despite the absence of a national framework regulating asylum. Thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au représentant d'Autriche.
Mr. President, Austria welcomes His Excellency the Minister of State and his delegation to the UPR and thanks them for their report. We note with appreciation the ratification of CAT following the first round of UPR. However, echoing concerns expressed by the High Commissioner, we call on the government to fully ensure the protection, rights to freedom of expression and freedom of association and assembly of human rights defenders and political activists. Could the government explain which steps it is taking to better protect religious minorities and to ensure freedom of religion and belief? His Excellency the Minister mentioned new protective legislation ensuring legal rights, minimum wage, housing and social standards for domestic labourers. Is there a concrete time frame for enactment of this law and what measures are envisaged to ensure a speedy implementation? Austria offers the following recommendations to the government of the UAE. 1. Ratify the ICCPR, the Rome Statute of the ICC, opt-cut and withdraw your reservations to CAT. 2. Ensure the full protection of the rights of freedom of expression, association, assembly, religion and belief by all UAE residents. 3. Take steps to protect human rights defenders, journalists and religious minorities from discrimination, harassment or intimidation, including the arbitrary deprivation of nationality. 4. Enshrine full equality between women and men in the Constitution and enact specific legislation to protect women, including domestic migrant workers, from sexual and domestic violence. 5. Abolish the death penalty and ensure that fair trial guarantees are properly implemented. I thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant d'Azerbaïdjan.
Mr. President, Azerbaijan warmly welcomes the delegation of United Arab Emirates to the UPR and thanks His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammad Gargash, Minister of State of Foreign Affairs of UAE, for the presentation of the national report. We congratulate United Arab Emirates concerning the continuing accession to human rights instruments such as the Convention Against Torture and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We welcome the strengthening of cooperation with the United Nations human rights instruments. Since its first UPR, a number of special rapporteurs as well as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights visited the country. We expect that the establishment of the Human Rights Department within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will substantially contribute to the development of the collaboration with UN human rights bodies. We recommend UAE to further continue the existing cooperation with UN human rights mechanisms. We commend the efforts of the government in order to promote and empower women's rights, including the update of the national strategy for the advancement of women in the UAE for 2013-2017. We recommend UAE to continue putting forward effective measures for the protection and promotion of the rights of women in the country. UAE has also made considerable efforts to improve the education in the country. In that regard, we recommend UAE to further strengthen its role as an international center for higher education. Finally, the delegation of Azerbaijan would like to assure once again the brotherly delegation of the United Arab Emirates of our full support and cooperation. Thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Bahreïn. Excellence, je vous en prie.
في البلد باسم وفد بلادي أن أرحب بمعالي الدكتور أنور محمد قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة والوفد المرافق له، ونتقدم بجزيل الشكر على البيان المستفيض والشامل الذي قدمه أمام مجلسنا الموقر، والذي يؤكد على الأهمية القصوى التي تمنحها الإمارات لحماية وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان. السيد الرئيس، لقد اطلع وفد بلادي باهتمام بالغ على التقرير الوطني الثاني للدولة وعلى التقارير الأخرى ذات العلاقة، وإذ يشيد وفد بلادي عاليا بالتشريعات والخطط والمبادرات الوطنية العديدة لدولة الإمارات، ومنها الاستراتيجية الوطنية لحماية حقوق العمالة الوافدة، الخطة الوطنية للمسنين، القانون الاتحادي بشأن رعاية الأطفال مجهولي النسب وتنظيم رعايتهم، وتمكين المرأة من دخولها سلك القضاء والنيابة العامة والسلك الدبلوماسي والقنصلي. السيد الرئيس، وفي هذا الصدد يوصي وفد بلادي دولة الإمارات بتحقيق الانسجام الأمثل بين التشريعات الداخلية والاتفاقيات والبروتوكوليات الدولية التي صادقت عليها، كما يوصي بمواصلة دراسة إنشاء مؤسسة وطنية مستقلة لحقوق الإنسان تسهم في نشر الوعي وثقافة حقوق الإنسان في المجتمع الإماراتي. السيد الرئيس، ختاما يود وفد بلادي التقدم بالسؤال التالي: هل توجد لدى الدولة آلية للتشاور مع مؤسسات المجتمع المدني فيما يتعلق بوضع السياسات والتشريعات الرامية لتعزيز حقوق الإنسان؟ وشكرا السيد الرئيس.
Je vous remercie, Excellence. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Bangladesh. Excellence, s'il vous plaît.
President, the delegation would like to welcome His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammed Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, and his delegation among us. We commend the national report reflecting the progress made in the promotion and protection of human rights, as well as detailed information on the actions taken on the recommendations accepted during the first cycle of its UPR. We appreciate the UAE government's sustained efforts to further consolidate the human rights situation in the country. The establishment of a set of interrelated national policies and strategies to promote and ensure the enjoyment of fundamental human rights and freedom are welcome steps. In particular, we commend the formulation of a strategy and a plan of action to establish migrant workers' rights, provide for their protection, and improve their working and living conditions. Mr. President, we are informed that there have been some strategies and plan of action adopted also to safeguard and protect workers' rights and improve their working conditions. In this regard, we would like to know from the distinguished delegation what are the measures and actions taken to protect wages of workers. Finally, Mr. President, we would like to recommend to UAE to take further measures and initiatives to implement the strategy for the protection of laborers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe maintenant la parole au représentant du Bélarus.
Мы приветствуем делегацию Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов и благодарим ее за представление доклада. Отмечаем приверженность правительства ОАЭ делу борьбы с торговлей людьми и активное международное взаимодействие в этой сфере, в том числе в рамках группы друзей, объединенных в борьбе с торговлей людьми. Приветствуем присоединение Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов к Палермскому протоколу, а также сотрудничество со специальным докладчиком по торговле людьми и специальным докладчиком по торговле детьми, детской проституции и порнографии. Отмечаем обеспечение высокого качества медицинского обслуживания граждан и приверженность правительства достижению целей развития тысячелетия в области всеобщего образования. Хотели бы рекомендовать правительству ОАЭ далее наращивать национальные и международные усилия в целях предупреждения и искоренения торговли людьми, включая обеспечение эффективной защиты жертв торговли. Также рекомендуем благоприятно рассмотреть возможность присоединения к Международному пакту об экономических, социальных и культурных правах и Международному пакту о гражданских и политических правах. Благодарю.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de la Belgique.
Monsieur le Président, la Belgique salue les efforts déployés par les Émirats arabes unis pour donner suite aux recommandations du premier EPU. Elle encourage la poursuite de ces efforts afin de tenir compte de certains développements récents relatifs aux droits de l'homme dans ce pays. Mon pays s'inquiète particulièrement des restrictions à la liberté d'expression et à la liberté d'association. Dans ce contexte, la Belgique recommande aux Émirats arabes unis de 1. Mettre la législation pénale, notamment les articles 8 et 176 du Code pénal, en concordance avec les standards internationaux qui régissent la liberté d'expression. 2. Respecter le droit à la liberté d'expression et d'association et de restreindre au strict nécessaire l'usage de poursuites pénales contre les personnes qui font usage de ces droits. 3. Coopérer avec les procédures spéciales et accéder aux demandes en cours des rapporteurs spéciaux de pouvoir visiter ce pays. Concernant la peine de mort, la Belgique plaide pour son abolition. Ceci étant, tant que les Émirats arabes unis maintiendront la peine de mort, la Belgique souhaiterait formuler les recommandations suivantes. 1. Respecter les standards minimaux à ce sujet. 2. Appliquer la peine de mort en conformité avec l'article 37 de la Convention des droits de l'enfant à laquelle les Émirats arabes unis sont partis. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant du Bhoutan. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Mr. President, my delegation extends a warm welcome to His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammad Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of the United Arab Emirates, and his delegation to this session of the UPR Working Group. We thank His Excellency for the comprehensive presentation of their national report. Bhutan appreciates the significant measures undertaken by the government of UAE for the promotion and protection of human rights of its citizens. While noting with appreciation the establishment of a national committee to combat human trafficking, we would like to pose the following question to the delegation. What are the mechanisms that have been devised to deal with victims of human trafficking in terms of support and rehabilitation to these victims? Mr. President, Bhutan applauds the numerous efforts undertaken by the government of UAE in fulfilling its human rights commitments. In this regard, its accession to numerous international human rights instruments and its constructive engagement with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is a clear reflection of UAE's commitment to advance the fundamental rights and freedoms of its people. We encourage the government of UAE to continue this positive cooperation with the international human rights mechanisms. In conclusion, Bhutan would like to recommend that UAE continue to strengthen the role of its national mechanisms and institutions for the promotion and protection of human rights in the country. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant du Brunei Darussalam. Ah, pardon. Pardon, je fais erreur. Je passe plutôt la parole à la distinguée représentante du Brésil. Mes excuses, Madame l'ambassadeur. Votre Excellence, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Président, vous êtes pardonné. Brazil welcomes the delegation of the UAE to the second cycle of the UPR. We are pleased to learn that important progress has been achieved, particularly with the ratification of core international instruments such as CAT and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. We also recognize the efforts against human trafficking, the accession to the Palermo Protocol, and the draft amendment to the Federal Act number 51 are important steps to protect victims. Brazil reiterates the recommendation made in the first cycle for the ratification of ICCPR and ICESC. Brazil recognizes recent advancements in the rights of migrant workers, but Brazil recommends UAE to continue strengthening the protection of all foreign laborers through the adoption of legislation which complies with international human rights standards. We are very much encouraged by His Excellency Dr. Anwar's description of the opportunities given to women in the UAE. But we would like, the Brazilian government would very much like to ask you about national policies, measures, and legislation to tackle racial discrimination. Thank you.
Merci, Excellence. Et je parle au distingué représentant du Brunei Darussalam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brunei Darussalam would like to thank the delegation of the United Arab Emirates led by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammad Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, for the presentation of the national report. We congratulate the UAE on conducting wide consultations involving relevant stakeholders in the preparation of its national report for the second cycle. Brunei Darussalam appreciates the UAE's commitment towards the promotion and protection of human rights for its people, as evidently seen through the establishment of its various national policies and strategies. In this regard, we welcome the steps it has taken to strengthen women's rights, especially in its implementation of the National Strategy for the Advancement of Women. Brunei Darussalam is also encouraged by the UAE's endeavors to ensure its people's right to education, namely its school integration project to include young persons with special needs. Furthermore, we commend the country's efforts in providing high-quality health care, particularly for children and mothers. Finally, in its initiatives to improve the quality of human life through its drive towards a green economy, we commend the UAE's role as host to the to the headquarters of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. We would recommend the UAE to continue its good momentum towards this positive end. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie Madame et je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante du Burkina Faso.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma délégation félicite les Émirats arabes unis pour la présentation de son rapport détaillé et note avec intérêt l'ensemble des efforts faits par le pays pour mettre en œuvre les recommandations qu'il avait acceptées en 2008. La détermination à progresser encore plus dans la voie de la promotion et de la protection des droits de l'homme, tel que mentionné dans le rapport, a permis en effet d'entamer de grandes réformes législatives, réglementaires et institutionnelles que le Burkina Faso tient à saluer. Nous notons en particulier avec intérêt la ratification de plusieurs instruments internationaux relatifs aux droits de l'homme, les projets de loi en cours sur les travailleurs domestiques et les droits de l'enfant, la mise en place d'un haut comité pour la protection de l'enfance ayant permis la création d'un centre de protection de l'enfance, ainsi que l'existence d'une commission de lutte contre la traite des êtres humains. Le Burkina Faso encourage les Émirats arabes unis à poursuivre ces projets normatifs et à les finaliser. Nous souhaitons enfin formuler 3 recommandations au pays. Ratifier les autres conventions internationales relatives aux droits de l'homme auxquelles il n'est pas encore parti, mettre en place une commission nationale des droits de l'homme conforme aux principes de Paris et enfin poursuivre ses efforts en matière de promotion et de protection des droits des femmes afin qu'elles s'intègrent pleinement dans la dynamique de développement du pays. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. La parole au distingué représentant d'Australie.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Australia welcomes the delegation of the United Arab Emirates to the Human Rights Council. Australia welcomes the United Arab Emirates' accession to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. We also commend its invitation to the UN Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, whose visit to the UAE took place in 2012. We welcome efforts since 2008 to eliminate gender-based discrimination, including citizenship rights for all children of UAE women, and recommend that the United Arab Emirates implement further measures to support victims of domestic violence. We encourage the United Arab Emirates to take further measures to strengthen its human rights framework, including in relation to freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and due process. In this regard, we recommend that the UAE accede to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and its optional protocols, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and adopt measures to promote awareness of the rights contained in these instruments. Consistent with Australia's universal opposition to the death penalty, we recommend that the UAE establish a moratorium on the death penalty as a first step towards complete abolition of this practice and accession to the second optional protocol of the ICCPR. Thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Tchad.
Tout d'abord, la bienvenue à la délégation des États des Émirats arabes unis, conduite par son Excellence Dr Anwar Gargash. Féliciter les efforts fournis par ces pays frères dans la mise en œuvre des recommandations qui lui avaient été faites lors du premier cycle de l'EPU. Ma délégation salue la volonté du gouvernement émirati dans sa ferme volonté à progresser dans la voie de la promotion et la protection des droits de l'homme. Pour preuve, la modification de la Constitution, l'adoption de plusieurs lois renforçant les droits de l'homme. Il s'agit notamment de la création des directions chargées des droits de l'homme dans plusieurs départements ministériels, le renforcement des mécanismes nationaux de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme, l'implication des associations et institutions d'intérêt national et enfin l'établissement de politiques et stratégies nationales visant à garantir les exercices des droits de l'homme et des libertés fondamentales. Ma délégation encourage le gouvernement émirati à poursuivre sa coopération avec les différents mécanismes relatifs aux droits de l'homme afin de relever tous les défis pouvant entraver la pleine jouissance de ces droits. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je vous remercie. La parole au distingué représentant du Chili. Excellence, s'il vous plaît.
Una cordial bienvenida a la delegación de Emiratos Árabes Unidos. Agradecemos la presentación del ministro Gargach. Valoramos las medidas adoptadas por el país para promover y proteger los derechos humanos, ratificando numerosos instrumentos. Destacamos que una de las prioridades de sus autoridades sea la evaluación de las estrategias existentes para promover los derechos humanos de las mujeres. Deseamos formular respetuosamente las siguientes recomendaciones. Primero, considerar el establecimiento de una moratoria de las ejecuciones vistas a abolir la pena de muerte. Segundo, ratificar el Pacto de Derechos Civiles y Políticos y la Convención contra la Tortura. Y tercero, de conformidad a lo recomendado por el CEDAW, incorporar plenamente en la Constitución o en otra legislación nacional el principio de la igualdad de género. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Chine. Excellence, je vous en prie.
中方欢迎卡尔喀斯外交国部长率阿联酋代表团出席这次会议。中方对阿联酋近年来在人权领域取得成就表示赞赏和祝贺。阿联酋致力提高妇女地位，促进妇女发展，保障儿童、残疾人、老年人权利，重视加大对卫生、教育事业和社会保障体系投入，努力保护一系工人权利，取得显著成效。阿联酋重视绿色经济和可持续发展，这对一个具有丰富油气资源的国家而言实属难能可贵。中国建议阿联酋继续推动经济社会可持续发展，进一步加强社会保障体系建设，使人民更好地享受各项人权。谢谢朱先生。
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant du Costa Rica.
Gracias, señor presidente. La delegación de Costa Rica da la bienvenida a la delegación de Emiratos Árabes Unidos y agradece por la presentación de su informe y su vocación de diálogo con el sistema. En primera instancia, hemos podido constatar con satisfacción que en los últimos años los Emiratos Árabes han logrado un desarrollo importante institucional a través de la creación de órganos de control y promoción. También queremos felicitarlos por su adhesión a la Convención contra la Tortura y a la Convención sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad. Existen algunos aspectos sobre los que esta delegación de manera respetuosa desea llamar la atención de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos. Específicamente, la no prohibición de la discriminación racial por cuestiones de origen nacional, ya que podría dar lugar a prácticas discriminatorias. El sistema de kafala, que muchas veces conlleva la confiscación de pasaportes y la desprotección de trabajadores domésticos en la ley y en la práctica. Hacemos un eco de la preocupación del CEDAW sobre la persistencia de la trata de mujeres y niñas con fines de explotación sexual y económica. Formularemos dos recomendaciones. Uno, considerar acceder al protocolo opcional de la Convención contra la Tortura y formular una invitación abierta al relator contra la tortura para visitar el país. Segundo, ratificar el Estatuto de Roma sobre la Corte Penal Internacional y armonizar su legislación de acuerdo a las obligaciones de este estatuto. Gracias.
Je vous remercie et je donne maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Côte d'Ivoire.
La Côte d'Ivoire souhaite une chaleureuse bienvenue à la délégation des Émirats Arabes Unis et lui adresse ses félicitations pour la présentation détaillée de son second rapport à l'examen périodique universel. Ma délégation salue la pertinence du rapport qui nous instruit sur le niveau de collaboration de cet État avec les mécanismes des droits de l'homme et encourage le gouvernement émirien pour les initiatives prises en faveur de la promotion de la protection des droits humains sur son territoire, qui se traduisent notamment par son adhésion à la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées en 2010 et à la Convention contre la torture en 2012. Monsieur le Président, ma délégation voudrait exprimer son appréciation pour les dispositions nationales prises en faveur du droit des enfants, de l'éducation pour tous et du renforcement des capacités. En l'occurrence, les taux élevés de scolarisation à tous les niveaux et les taux d'abandon scolaire quasi identiques, aussi bien chez les garçons que chez les filles. Ma délégation se félicite particulièrement des initiatives prises en faveur des formations aux droits de l'homme à des niveaux élevés, dispensés par les nouveaux départements des droits de l'homme et qui ont ciblé les fonctionnaires de divers ministères, ainsi que des ateliers portant sur des questions relatives aux droits de l'homme qui ont été organisés à l'intention des écoles de police. Elle invite le gouvernement des Émirats à poursuivre les efforts en vue du suivi de ces formations, de leur mise en œuvre effective et d'une plus large diffusion de ces enseignements. À cet égard, ma délégation voudrait recommander au gouvernement des Émirats ce qui suit. Établir une institution nationale des droits de l'homme, indépendante, dotée d'un mandat solide et conforme aux normes de Paris. Renforcer sa coopération avec les mécanismes onusiens relatifs aux droits de l'homme, notamment les titulaires de mandats au titre des procédures spéciales des Nations Unies. Poursuivre le processus de ratification des instruments internationaux en matière de droits de l'homme auxquels le pays n'est pas encore parti. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie et je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente. Damos la bienvenida al doctor Anwar
Mohammad Gargash y a la delegación que lo acompaña. Agradecemos y felicitamos la calidad del Informe Nacional de Emiratos Árabes Unidos, así como las explicaciones aportadas en la presentación oral ante el Consejo. Señor Presidente, Cuba acoge con especial beneplácito la manera sostenida en que los Emiratos Árabes Unidos avanzan en la promoción y protección de los derechos humanos. Muestra de ello ha sido su compromiso con el examen periódico universal y el Consejo de Derechos Humanos, lo que ha quedado reflejado en la información detallada que se encuentra en el informe nacional. Luego de haber analizado este documento, nos gustaría conocer cuáles han sido las medidas tomadas por los Emiratos Árabes Unidos para promover el derecho a la educación. Señor Presidente, para concluir, Cuba recomienda respetuosamente a los Emiratos Árabes Unidos continuar con la implementación de las medidas adoptadas en materia de desarrollo y proseguir concediendo especial importancia al fortalecimiento del sector de los servicios sanitarios en el país. Muchas gracias.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Chypre.
Mr. Vice President, Cyprus would like to thank the United Arab Emirates for the preparation of a comprehensive national report and an indeed informative presentation by His Excellency the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. Cyprus recognizes the significant progress made in the UAE as regards human rights issues, and in this regard, we welcome in particular the recent approval by the Emirati government cabinet of the Domestic Workers Bill. My delegation acknowledges the commitment of the Emirati government to improve and protect the rights of migrant workers in the country. These efforts include the protection of migrant workers from all forms of exploitation and the access to decent housing to improve living conditions for migrant workers. Further to the above, Cyprus wishes to encourage the UAE to consider ratifying the International Labour Organization's Conventions number 87 and number 98 on freedom of association and collective bargaining. In this same vein, my delegation would also like to offer the following recommendation: that the government of the UAE bolsters its practical capacity to oversee the working and living conditions of migrant workers. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Je vous remercie et je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Danemark. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Thank you, Chairman. We thank the delegation of the UAE for their presentation here today. We note the positive steps taken to improve the human rights situation in the country. We remain, however, concerned about the alleged violations of the freedom of expression and of assembly and association, including alleged attempts to arbitrarily deprive political activists of their citizenship. We commend the noticeable steps taken by the government in recent years, which have significantly improved women's rights. We encourage the government of the UAE to continue the promotion of women's rights. In particular, we recommend that legislation is introduced to prohibit the right of men to physically punish their wives. We highly welcome the UAE's recent decision to accede to the Convention Against Torture, but recommend the withdrawal of the declaration made upon accession regarding Article 1 on the Convention. In this context, Denmark also recommends prompt and impartial investigation of all allegations of torture and prosecution of those responsible for ordering, carrying out, or acquiescing in torture or ill treatment. Finally, we welcome the signing of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court in 2000 and would like to ask whether the government intends to ratify the statute within the near future. Thank you, Chairman.
Merci. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Djibouti.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous saluons la présence de la délégation émirati conduite par son Excellence Dr Anwar Mohamed Kargash, ministre d'État des Affaires étrangères parmi nous, et nous le félicitons pour la présentation de ce rapport de grande qualité dans le cadre de la 15e session de l'EPU. Nous félicitons le gouvernement émirati pour avoir adopté un ensemble de politiques et stratégies nationales visant à renforcer et garantir l'exercice des droits de l'homme et des libertés fondamentales d'ici à l'an 2021. Toutefois, nous aimerions poser deux questions à la délégation émirati et faire deux recommandations dans le cadre de ce dialogue interactif. Première question, Quels sont les résultats réalisés par le gouvernement en introduisant les principes des droits de l'homme dans le programme d'éducation? Deuxième question, quelles sont les actions prises par l'État pour promouvoir la culture participative à la vie politique pour les générations futures? Première recommandation, nous recommandons au gouvernement de renforcer les efforts du Conseil supérieur pour l'enfance et la mère et fournir des ressources adéquates pour coordonner la politique de l'État dans le domaine de la promotion des droits des enfants. Deuxième recommandation, concrétiser l'adoption de la loi sur la protection des droits de l'enfant qui a été récemment annoncée. Et je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci et je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de l'Équateur.
Gracias, señor vicepresidente. La delegación del Ecuador da la más cordial bienvenida a la delegación de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos y agradece la presentación de su informe nacional para el segundo ciclo del examen periódico universal. Como ejemplo de buenas prácticas, deseamos resaltar la creación del Consejo Superior para la Maternidad y la Infancia, que en cooperación con las instituciones de la sociedad civil está inmerso en la elaboración de la primera Estrategia Nacional para la Maternidad y la Infancia en los Emiratos Árabes Unidos, con la colaboración de UNICEF. También nos gustaría señalar como positivo el Plan Nacional de Desarrollo de Emiratos Árabes Unidos, llamado la Visión de los Emiratos para el 2012, que cuenta con 4 ejes fundamentales y que constituye una herramienta primordial para mejorar la calidad de vida de su población. Vemos con satisfacción que Emiratos Árabes Unidos ha cumplido con muchos de los compromisos voluntarios y las recomendaciones del primer ciclo del EPO respecto a la adhesión o ratificación de instrumentos internacionales como la Convención de las Naciones Unidas contra la Tortura y otros tratos o penas crueles, inhumanos o degradantes, la Convención sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad, entre otros. Apreciamos los esfuerzos de Emiratos Árabes Unidos en cuanto a lograr la igualdad efectiva de la mujer en la sociedad. El Ecuador formula cordialmente las siguientes recomendaciones. Realizar esfuerzos para incorporar en la Constitución o en otra legislación nacional el principio de igualdad entre hombres y mujeres y la respectiva reglamentación. Ratificar el Estatuto de Roma de la Corte Penal Internacional, la Convención sobre el Estatuto de los Refugiados y la Convención sobre el Estatuto de los Apátridas.
Je vous remercie et je passe maintenant la parole au représentant d'Égypte.
السادة وفد مصر، بداية الترحيب بوفد الموقع دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة برئاسة السيد الدكتور أنور قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية، ويود أن يشيد بالجهد الملموس الذي بذل في أداة التقرير الوطني والنهج المنفتح الذي تتبناه الحكومة الإماراتية إزاء التعاون مع الآلات الدولية لحقوق الإنسان. قد اطلعنا باهتمام على التقرير الوطني للإمارات، ويود وفد مصر الإشادة بالخطوات التي اتخذتها السلطات الإماراتية ومن بينها الانضمام إلى الأطر التعهدية الدولية لحقوق الإنسان وقيامها بإنشاء أقسام تعني بحقوق الإنسان في عدة وزارات رئيسية من بينها وزارتي الخارجية والداخلية، وإنشاء قسم لمكافحة الإتجار في البشر بوزارة العمل، إضافة للعمل على تدعيم وعمل مؤسسات الولايات الأخرى التي تعني بحقوق الإنسان على قرار المجلس الأعلى للطفولة والأمومة ومراكز إيواء النساء والأطفال ضحايا الإتجار وتنمية المجتمع في دبي. ختاما، يود وفد مصر التقدم بالتوصيات التالية إلى حكومة دولة الإمارات. أولا، استمرار سنة التشريعات اللازمة تعزيز وحماية واحترام حقوق المرأة ودورها في المجتمع، بما في ذلك تعزيز مشاركتها في مؤسسات الدولة والحصول على المساواة الكاملة في فرص العمل. ثانيا، العمل على تحديث الاستراتيجية الوطنية تمكين المرأة بحيث تشمل المزيد من البرامج والمشروعات التي تدعم وضعية المرأة كشريك رئيسي في عملية التنمية. ثالثا، متابعة اتخاذ الخطوات اللازمة على مستوى التشريعي والإجرائي لتوفير الحماية الكاملة للعمالة الوافدة في الإمارات. شكرا سيادة الرئيس.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante d'Estonie.
Thank you. Estonia very warmly welcomes the high-level delegation of the United Arab Emirates to the UPR's 15th session. We thank the UAE for their work in preparing the national report presented earlier and also for the additional information provided in the opening speech. We commend the UAE for ratifying the protocol to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing to the UN Convention against Transnational Organized Crime. We also commend the UAE for ratifying CAT and recommend proceeding swiftly with the ratification of OPCAT. Additionally, Estonia would like to make the following recommendations. We recommend that the UAE abolish corporal punishment and death penalty. Estonia recommends that the UAE ratify the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and accede to the agreement on the privileges and immunities of the ICC. We recommend to the UAE to accede to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Estonia welcomes the measures taken by the government of the UAE to promote migrant workers' rights and combating human trafficking. We urge the government to continue with the further efforts to this end. Thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de Finlande. Je fais erreur à nouveau, vous m'excusez. D'abord, nous passons à l'intervention du distingué représentant d'Éthiopie.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ethiopia welcomes the delegation of United Arab Emirates, led by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammed Gargash, Ministry of State for Foreign Affairs. We note with appreciation the progress made by the government of United Arab Emirates in achieving high living standards in the country. We welcome the national plan of the government of the United Arab Emirates to implement the recommendations of the Human Rights Council during its first UPR session. Noting the positive efforts of the government of the United Arab Emirates, my delegation would like to seek clarification on the measures taken by the government of the United Arab Emirates to further protection migrant workers' rights. My delegation would also like to encourage the government of the United Arab Emirates to continue on its active and fruitful engagement with the countries of origin of migrant workers. Finally, my delegation would like to recommend to the United Arab Emirates to continue on its efforts to provide more protection to domestic workers and improve their living conditions. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie et je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Finlande.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finland wishes to thank the United Arab Emirates for the national report and its presentation today. Finland welcomes the ratifications of the Convention Against Torture and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and its protocol to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. However, Finland is concerned that the UAE is still not party to many important international human rights instruments such as the ICCPR and the ICESCR. Finland would be interested in the government's views regarding the ratification of these instruments, including information about possible measures being taken to proceed towards ratification and the expected time frame. Moreover, Finland would like to express its concern about the UAE's reservations to the CEDAW. Finland has two recommendations. Ratify all the main international human rights instruments, especially the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Withdraw the reservations to Articles 2 and 16 of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Thank you.
Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de la France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie chaleureusement le ministre des Affaires étrangères des Émirats arabes unis et la délégation qui l'accompagne pour la présentation de leur rapport national. La France salue les efforts entrepris par les EAU pour le renforcement de la protection des droits de l'homme, notamment en faveur des travailleurs migrants et des femmes. Elle se félicite de la ratification par les Émirats arabes unis de la Convention contre la torture et de la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées. La France souhaite adresser les recommandations suivantes. Premièrement, ratifier le statut de Rome, le pacte international relatif aux droits civils et politiques et la Convention sur les disparitions forcées. Deuxièmement, poursuivre ses efforts en faveur des droits des travailleurs migrants, notamment en s'assurant de la bonne application de la législation nationale par les employeurs et en poursuivant la coopération avec les pays d'origine de ces travailleurs. Troisièmement, assurer la progression de la place des femmes dans la société émirienne en œuvrant à l'élimination des formes de discrimination qui pourraient persister concernant les modalités de divorce ou le traitement des violences domestiques. Enfin, garantir le maintien du moratoire de fait sur les exécutions et envisager d'abolir la peine de mort. Je vous remercie.
Je donne à présent la parole à son Excellence, le Dr Anwar Mohammed Gargash et à sa délégation, afin de répondre aux questions soulevées jusqu'à présent. Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I have listened with interest and attention to the various comments, and I thank you very much for this interactive side of the debate, which I think is very helpful. And I think that I have categorized many of the comments under certain items here. First of all, I would like to address something mentioned by His Excellency the representative of Austria regarding tolerance, religious tolerance. And I think this is one of our big success stories in the United Arab Emirates, our ability to marry our Muslim tradition with the presence of various communities, and to guarantee that religious practices are part and parcel of the fabric of everyday life. There are about 64 churches in the United Arab Emirates of all denominations, as well as Hindu temples, as well as Sikh temples, and so on and so forth. So that is, I think, one of our more important goals in trying to build an open and progressive society. Furthermore, I think that in a very difficult period in Arab history, we have walked a fine line between the requirements for national security and between the requirements for an open society that allows expression. This has not always been difficult, but I think that we have walked it rather successfully in a very difficult and turbulent region. Various, of course, things have been thrown at us, and many of these things are groundless, and I also urge some of the speakers to actually seek further information on our side to clarify these important elements. On the issue of women, which has also been repeated, again I urge you that to understand that we have one of the most progressive and successful records on women in the region and of any Muslim and Arab society. This has allowed us to enable women in the workplace legally, and so on and so forth. So I urge also a better understanding of a very successful record on enablement of women in the United Arab Emirates tradition or experience. I would like, there has been, and I think understandably, various questions about labor. This continues to be work in progress. We will always work on improving here. We've worked very hard. I would like to refer to Mr. Maher Al-Ubad from the Ministry of Labor to speak very briefly for 2 minutes on some of the items that we have undertaken to improve labor conditions, which continues to be work in progress. Maher.
سيدي، من خلال الأسئلة والمداخلات أود أن أشير إلى 3 نقاط. لقد تكلمت صاحب المعالي عن موضوع ظروف العمل، وتمت الإشارة إلى التطور الكبير الذي حدث في مسألة ظروف العمل. النقاط ال3 التي أحب أن أشير إليها هي أول، في بداية مسألة حماية الأجور، ونحن نرى أن الأجر هو خط أحمر، وذلك لما يترتب على عدم دفع الأجر من تداعيات. بالنسبة لدولة الإمارات، قامت بإنشاء مكتب لحماية الأجور في سنة 2008، وكان من أهم اختصاصاته والمهام التي وكلت له اللي هو وضع وتنفيذ نظام متكامل لمراقبة حماية الأجور وساعات العمل. وكان ناتج هذا المكتب اللي هو نظام حماية الأجور، وأتصور نحن من أولى الدول التي ابتدعت هذا النظام، والذي من خلاله نستطيع أن نقوم بشكل دائم بالاطلاع على عمليات صرف الأجور والتأكد من أن الصرف تم بما هو متفق عليه في العقود، وكذلك إذا توجد هناك بعض الاستقطاعات الغير قانونية. حاليا ومن خلال هذا النظام نستطيع أن نتأكد من صرف أكثر من 3,500,000 عامل يعملون في 235,000 منشأة مسجلة في وزارة العمل. أيضا من خلال هذا النظام استطعنا أن نحيل 377 منشأة إلى القضاء ثبت تأخير سداد أجور عمالها أكثر من شهرين مع إعطاء الحق للعمال بالانتقال إلى منشأة أخرى. النقطة الثانية التي أحب أن أشير إليها اللي هي موضوع وقد تم الإشارة إليها أيضا في كلمة معالي الوزير اللي هو التنقل داخل سوق العمل. وبالفعل من خلال من 2010 أصدر القرار صاحب المعالي وزير العمل، وكان هذا القرار هو يضع ضوابط والشروط لمنح تصاريح العمل الجديدة. والقرار هذا يستطيع من خلاله أي عامل وأيا كان مستواه المهاري بالانتقال بعد انتهاء مدة العقد. وأيضا إذا كان في أي إخلال من صاحب العمل فإن القانون يسمح له بالانتقال وبدون الرجوع إلى صاحب العمل، وأيضا بدون التقيد بشرط المدة. النقطة الأخيرة التي أحب أن ألفت النظر إليها اللي هو تحضر تشريعات الدولة وعلى رأسه دستور الدولة وهو المعمول به في القضاء، باعتبار أن الجواز حق شخصي لا يجوز حجزه إلا بحكم قضائي. وقد أصدر سمو الشيخ سيف بن زايد آل نهيان نائب رئيس مجلس الوزراء وزير الداخلية تعميما بعدم حجز جواز السفر لأي شخص إلا بموجب حكم قضائي. وفي حالة سلم العامل جواز سفر طواعية لسبب ما فيحق له المطالبة باستعادته في أي وقت يشاء، وتكون المطالبة إذا تعثر صاحب العمل عن طريق وزارة العمل أو وزارة الداخلية، والتي تقوم بالتعاون مع إدارة حقوق الإنسان والجهات المختصة باسترجاع جواز سفر وتسليم العامل. شكرا.
شكرا ماهر. Furthermore, I think on labor, as I mentioned earlier, we have worked also with the major countries that are labor exporting in order to improve the regime in the bilateral labor relationship in order to ensure that workers are not exploited. And we continue, I mean, work in progress continue on the labor issue. I'm going to turn to Dr. Abdurrahim Al-Awadi, who is the Assistant Minister for Legal Affairs, to address various issues about the UAE acceding to various treaties and international treaties and international instruments. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to speak in Arabic if you don't mind. فيما يتعلق بالانضمام إلى الاتفاقيات الدولية التي أشار إليها عدد من الوفود، نود القول بأن الدولة من خلال أجهزتها المعنية تقوم بمراجعة دورية لموقف الدولة من الاتفاقيات الدولية التي لم تنضم إليها، وكذلك النظر في رفع التحفظات التي أبدتها على الاتفاقيات التي هي طرفا فيها. وجدير بالذكر بأن الإمارات قبل انضمامها إلى أي اتفاقية دولية تقوم بالإعداد الجيد لتطبيق الالتزامات الواردة في تلك الاتفاقية، وذلك من خلال سن القوانين ووضع الآليات المناسبة لذلك. أود أن أشير إلى الموقف من بعض الاتفاقيات التي تم الإشارة إليها من خلال مداخلات الدول الأعضاء. موقف الدولة من خلال بالنسبة للانضمام للعهدين الدوليين لحقوق الإنسان، الدولة بصدد بحث انضمامها إلى العهدين الدوليين على ضوء قيامها بدراسة ملائمة تشريعاتها الداخلية لأحكامها، وعلى ضوء مدى اتساق بعض هذه الأحكام مع الخلفيات الاجتماعية والثقافية والدينية لشعب الإمارات، مع التأكيد بأن الدولة تطبق العديد من الأحكام الواردة في هذين العهدين، وذلك على الرغم بأنها ليست طرفا فيها. فيما يتعلق بالتحفظات الواردة على اتفاقية حقوق الطفل، قامت الدولة في الحقيقة الأجهزة المعنية انتهت من دراسة تحفظاتها على اتفاقية حقوق الطفل، وهي بصدد الرد بإيجابية بالنسبة لتلك التحفظات. فيما يتعلق بالتحفظات الواردة على اتفاقية القضاء على كافة أشكال التمييز ضد المرأة، الدولة حرصت حرصا تاما على تحقيق المساواة بين الجنسين، وأن تحفظات الدولة عند انضمامها لهذه الاتفاقية قد انصرفت فقط إلى تلك الأحكام المخالفة أو التي تتعارض مع الشريعة الإسلامية، وهناك أيضا دراسة للنظر في ما دون ذلك في الحقيقة بالنسبة للأحكام الأخرى. فيما يتعلق
بموقف الدولة من الانضمام للبروتوكول الملحق باتفاقية مناهضة التعذيب. الدولة كما تعلمون انضمت حديثا إلى هذه الاتفاقية في يوليو 2012، وأن هذه الاتفاقية في الحقيقة أيضا من الاتفاقيات الهامة بالنسبة للدولة التي انضمت إليها أخيرا، وأننا أيضا بصدد النظر في الانضمام إلى هذا البروتوكول، وأن هذا البروتوكول أيضا محل دراسة. فيما يتعلق بموقفنا من نظام روما الأساسي بشأن المحكمة الجنائية الدولية، طبعا الإمارات تؤمن إيمانا تاما بالعدالة الدولية، وقد ساهمت بفعالية تامة في كافة مراحل إعداد نظام روما الأساسي وكذلك الأنظمة اللاحقة، وكذلك قامت بالتوقيع على نظام روما الأساسي في نوفمبر 2000، وأنها أيضا وفي إطار موقف موحد للدول العربية سوف تنظر في الحقيقة بالتصديق على هذه الاتفاقية. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
شكرا جزيلا.
Je vous remercie, Excellence. Nous poursuivons le dialogue interactif avec l'intervention de la distinguée représentante du Royaume-Uni.
Thank you, Mr. President. The UK thanks the UAE for their national report and notes the progress made, including in promoting participation through the expansion of the electorate and the government's empowerment programme, combating human trafficking and increasing opportunities for women. This shows a clear effort by the UAE to improve the human rights of its citizens. We acknowledge that the situation of foreign workers has improved, but we encourage the UAE to strengthen the protection of all foreign workers, including by implementing legislation to curb abuses and improve working conditions. We have two recommendations. One, repeal the 1980 law on publications and amend other relevant legislation to ensure it is aligned with international human rights law on the freedom of expression. Two, write and publish an action plan with clear milestones and timelines to ensure swift and effective implementation of legislation protecting the living and working conditions of foreign workers. We welcome the establishment of human rights departments in key ministries and the Federal National Council's call to establish a human rights committee. We urge the UAE to establish a national human rights institution in accordance with the Paris Principles. We also urge the UAE to ensure its legislation protects and promotes individuals' rights to freedom of expression. Finally, we strongly encourage the UAE to fully abolish the death penalty. Thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante de Grèce.
Vice President, Greece would like to warmly welcome the delegation of the United Arab Emirates, headed by His Excellency Minister Anwar Mohammed Gargash. We express our appreciation for the country's efforts to implement most of the recommendations of the first cycle and welcome the many significant developments. We have the following questions and recommendations. 1. We noticed with great satisfaction the creation of many new and different ministry departments and institutions relating to human rights during the last years. Could you please elaborate further on the work done and the progress achieved by them in the field of human rights? There has not been, though, a national human rights institution established yet. What are the efforts made by your country so far in order to establish a national independent human rights institution? 2. Regarding the issue of human trafficking, we acknowledge with appreciation the many positive efforts of your government to address the phenomenon, including the strategic plan of the National Committee to Combat Human Trafficking. We would like to ask you to elaborate on the results of their actions and share best practices with this Council. We recommend that you continue the good work in this area. 3. Finally, Greece notes with appreciation the existence of several actions regarding human rights education and would like to ask for the delegation's relevant evaluation. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Guatemala.
Gracias, señor presidente. Guatemala agradece a la delegación de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos por la presentación de su informe. Vemos con agrado su determinación de progresar en la promoción y protección de los derechos humanos así como a contribuir y responder positivamente a las prácticas mundiales en esa materia, tal como lo manifiesta en el párrafo segundo de su informe nacional. Nos complacen las mejoras en la institucionalidad a nivel nacional con la incorporación de dependencias encargadas de los derechos humanos en varios ministerios. Encomiamos la ratificación del Convenio sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad y de la Convención contra la Tortura, así como la visita de 3 titulares de mandato en el período posterior a su primer examen periódico universal. Nos congratulamos de los logros en materia de derechos humanos de la mujer y exhortamos a los Emiratos Árabes Unidos a que continúen sus iniciativas hasta asegurar que todas las mujeres gocen plenamente de los derechos humanos y libertades fundamentales en pie de igualdad con los hombres. Guatemala recomienda, primero, que se formule una invitación abierta a todos los procedimientos especiales del Consejo de Derechos Humanos y, segundo, la ratificación de los pactos internacionales de derechos civiles y políticos y de derechos económicos, sociales y culturales y la Convención sobre los Derechos de todos los trabajadores migratorios y sus familiares. Muchas gracias.
Merci. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Hongrie.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Hungary warmly welcomes the delegates of the United Arab Emirates to the 15th session of the UPR and wishes to congratulate the country that it ranked high in the Index on the Rule of Law and Judicial Transparency in 2011, developed by the World Justice Project. We welcome the series of progressive measures your government has introduced in this area so far. Human rights and democracy could be promoted only through dialogue and partnership based on mutual respect and confidence. Hungary will keep supporting such a dialogue and partnership with the United Arab Emirates in this field. Hungary believes that the abolition of the death penalty contributes to the enhancement of human dignity and to the enjoyment of the right to life. For this reason, we recommend that the government reduce the number of crimes where death penalty can be imposed. Finally, we note with satisfaction that the country was ranked first in the Arab world in the Gender Equality Index published by the World Economic Forum in 2011. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Inde. Votre Excellence, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. President. India warmly welcomes the delegation of the United Arab Emirates led by Dr. Anwar Mohammad Gargash and thanks it for the presentation of its national report. We note with appreciation the initiatives taken by the government of UAE in its domestic laws, legislation and regulations. We hope that adequate monitoring mechanisms exist to ensure the implementation of the legislations. India notes the establishment of the Human Rights Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Special Education, Committee on Employment for Persons with Disabilities and Committee to Combat Human Trafficking Offences. India welcomes the wide range of interrelated national policies and strategies, including the Emirates Vision 2011. The corpus of laws and regulations taken to ensure that women have equal civil, political and economic rights is a welcome step. It is heartening to note the increasing numbers of women joining the diplomatic service. We recommend the government of the UAE to continue to enact legislations and strengthen policies which are necessary to empower women and strengthen their role in society. With close to 4 million migrant workers representing 200 nationalities, the government of UAE has an important responsibility towards their welfare. The national report of the UAE refers to the contract validation system to protect workers from deception and fraud in the recruitment process. On the 4th of April 2012, India was the first country to sign a protocol under the Memorandum of Understanding on Manpower for joint launch of an electronic contract validation system. This system, when brought into full operation, will ensure full transparency of the contractual employment terms and conditions, disclose such terms to the prospective workers and ensure informed consent of workers to the same terms. India has undertaken the necessary steps for operationalizing the system. We urge early implementation of this bilateral electronic validation system. We also recommend to the UAE to ratify the optional protocols to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We wish the UAE success in its future endeavors. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Indonésie.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation welcomes His Excellency Dr. Gargash and the delegation of the United Arab Emirates and thanks them for the presentation of their second cycle of UPR report. Well, Indonesia commends the UAE for its continued progress in the development context, ranking first in the Arab world and the 30th out of 187 countries, according to 2011 Human Development Report. Indonesia also welcomes various measures to empower women in the areas of education, health, and economy, to the social sector, as well as environment, public information, and political participation. My delegation in this regard recommends that the UAE accelerate its efforts in women's empowerment and gender equality, including through the updated national strategy for the advancement of women in the United Arab Emirates 2013-2017. Indonesia appreciates numerous steps taken in the protection of migrant workers in the UAE, including through the strengthening of its partnership with labor-sending countries, signing 10 memorandums of understanding with Asian labor-sending countries, including my country, and 8 bilateral cooperation agreements with Arab labor-sending countries with a view to regulate and protect the rights of migrant workers from these countries. Indonesia, therefore, recommends that the UAE continue these positive developments and consider ratifying the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and members of their families. In conclusion, Mr. President, my delegation encourages the UAE to continue its exemplary role in the promotion and protection of human rights in the region. I thank you.
Merci, Madame. Je donne maintenant la parole à la distinguée représentante d'Irak.
سيد الرئيس، يرحب وفد بلادي برئيس وفد دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة معالي وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية الدكتور أنور محمد القرقاش وأعضاء الوفد المرافق له، ويثمن عاليا الجهود التي بذلت في إعداد التقرير، والذي يعكس بلا شك عزم دولة الإمارات على مضي قدما للعمل على إضافة المزيد إلى سجل إنجازاته الحثيثة في مجال حقوق الإنسان، والرغبة الجادة في تعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان والنهوض بواقع هذه الحقوق والحريات الأساسية ودعمها في كافة المجالات، حيث كان ذلك واضحا من خلال الإجراءات التي اتخذت من قبل دولة الإمارات منذ اعتماد التقرير الأول. وبهذا الخصوص يشيد وفد بلادي بإنشاء الإمارات لجنة دائمة لمتابعة التقرير الدوري الشامل بموجب قرار مجلس الوزراء، وانضمامه إلى العديد من الصكوك الدولية بالبروتوكولات الاختيارية، والتي كانت آخرها الانضمام لاتفاقية الأمم المتحدة لمناهضة التعذيب وغيره من ضروب المعاملة القاسية أو العقوبة القاسية أو اللا إنسانية العام الماضي، بما يؤكد عزمها على مواصلة توطيد التعاون الدولي من أجل تعزيز حقوق الإنسان وحمايتها والإيفاء بالمعايير الدولية. وختاما، يتساءل وفد بلادي عن الإجراءات المتخذة من قبل الحكومة بشأن حماية حقوق كبار السن، ويوصي دولة الإمارات النظر في اعتماد استراتيجية وطنية لتعزيز وحماية حقوق كبار السن. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante d'Irlande.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ireland thanks the United Arab Emirates delegation for its comprehensive presentation this afternoon. Ireland welcomes the accession of the UAE to the Convention Against Torture last year and urges UAE to ensure that the comprehensive definition of torture contained within the Convention is enshrined in its national law. Noting that serious consideration is being given to this issue, Ireland encourages the UAE to establish a national human rights institution in accordance with the Paris Principles as soon as possible. Ireland notes the positive developments made by the UAE in the area of migrant workers' rights, including the new labour regulations and the introduction of compulsory housing standards. Ireland recommends that labour laws protecting employees' rights are strongly enforced to improve the living and working conditions of migrant workers, including the implementation by the Ministry of Labour of the provision for a minimum wage for all workers as provided for by law. Ireland notes that freedom of expression is guaranteed under Article 30 of the United Arab Emirates Constitution. As communication on the Internet falls clearly within the scope of the right to freedom of expression, it is important to ensure that the Internet remains an open, global and public forum and that freedom of expression is fully respected. In this regard, Ireland recommends that the UAE ensure legislation in this area is in line with international standards, including by amending the cybercrime law and repealing the November 2012 Federal Legal Decree No. 5 on cybercrime. I thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Italie.
Mr. President, we welcome the distinguished members of the United Arab Emirates delegation. Noting with appreciation the efforts deployed to protect human rights, Italy encourages the UAE to progress further along this path so as to build up the improvements already obtained. To this end, Italy would like to propose the following recommendations: to ratify the 2 international covenants and other core international human rights conventions, to consider the adoption of proper reforms in order to improve the protection of freedom for human rights defenders, to carry on their initiatives, to enhance the implementation of the constitutional provisions on freedom of expression. Noting that the issue of consular assistance to fellow nationals arrested or detained by the Emirates authorities still raises some concerns, Italy would like to ask in which way the government intends to address such problem with the purpose of better guaranteeing the rights of foreign detainees, with particular regard to their access to justice. Italy commends the good level of women's presence in institutions, universities and corporations, where the environment appears conducive to gender equality, while encouraging the UAE to progress further in implementing the international standards on rights of women. Italy remains concerned about the recurrent cases of violence against women. Acknowledging the establishment of new institutions providing rehabilitation services, we would like to ask if the government envisages the adoption of ad hoc measures aiming at better preventing violence against women, particularly domestic violence. Mr. President.
Je vous remercie et je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante du Japon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Japan appreciates the United Arab Emirates' commitment to international human rights standards, such as through the creation of a permanent human rights committee of the Federal National Council and Human Rights Department within several government ministries. We hope that these organizations will function effectively to further improve the human rights situation in the Emirates. Japan commends that the UAE has acceded to the Convention Against Torture as recommended by Japan during the previous review. At the same time, the ICESCR and ICCPR remain unratified, and Japan recommends that they are both ratified at the earliest possible date. Japan welcomes the work toward the formulation of a national strategy for the advancement of women, outlining basic policy on the strengthening of women's rights and the empowerment of women for the next 5 years. Japan recommends that this strategy is steadily implemented. Many countries and international organizations have expressed concerns over the detention of human rights defenders in the UAE. Japan hopes that the UAE will eliminate such concerns by responding sincerely with improved transparency and release of information. I thank you.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de Jordanie. Excellence, je vous en prie.
سيد الرئيس، يسرني أن أرحب بمعالي السيد أنور قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية والوفد المرافق، وأن أعرب عن الامتنان على العرض الشامل للتقرير الوطني الذي يقدم صورة رائدة للتقدم المحرز في ميدان حقوق الإنسان والحريات الأساسية الذي تشهده دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. السيد الرئيس، يثمن الأردن وبشكل خاص التطورات الإيجابية المتواصلة لتمتين الإطار التشريعي والمؤسسي لحقوق الإنسان والحريات الأساسية، بما في ذلك سن القانون الاتحادي بشأن حقوق المعاقين وسن القانون الاتحادي بشأن حظر بيع التبغ لمن تقل أعمارهم عن 18 عاما. كما يرحب الأردن بإنشاء إدارة لحقوق الإنسان في وزارة الداخلية الإماراتية تعنى بحماية ورعاية حقوق الإنسان ومتابعة شؤون حماية حقوق أفراد المجتمع. إضافة إلى ذلك، يقدر الأردن بشكل بالغ الجهود الكبيرة التي تبذلها حكومة الإمارات، بما في ذلك الإجراءات التشريعية والتنفيذية المتواصلة لتحسين أوضاع العمالة الوافدة وخاصة العمالة المنزلية. يود الأردن توجيه السؤال التالي لدولة الإمارات: ما هي الجهود التي تبذلها دولة الإمارات فيما يتعلق بمسألة إعمال التمتع بحقوق الإنسان في الدول النامية؟ كما نود التوصية بما يلي: مواصلة دعم صناديق الأمم المتحدة المعنية بحقوق الإنسان. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je vous remercie et je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Kenya.
Mr. President, we warmly welcome the delegation of the UAE to this meeting, and we thank them for the elaborate presentation of their national report. We have noted the government's continued efforts aimed at improving the human rights in the UAE, as well as its efforts in strengthening cooperation with the Human Rights Council, as well as the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We have also noted that since the last review, the UAE has undertaken some reflection on the establishment of the National Human Rights Institution based on the Paris Principles. And in this regard, we would encourage the government to continue with these efforts. By way of recommendation, we would encourage the government to continue to give consideration to acceding to the remaining core human rights instruments, including the two international covenants, civil political rights and economic, social and cultural rights, as well as the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and members of their families. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant du Koweït. Excellence, je vous en prie.
أرحب بمعالي وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيق الدكتور أنور محمد قرقاش والوفد المرافق له، وأشيد بما تقوم به البعثة الدائمة لدولة الإمارات في جنيف من عمل دؤوب ومثمر يقوده بكل كفاءة سعادة الأخ السفير عبيد الزعابي. إن التقرير محل المراجعة يعكس الاهتمام والحرص الكبيرين اللذين توليهما دولة الإمارات لتعزيز واحترام وكفالة حقوق الإنسان والحريات الأساسية، ويعبر عن الإدراك التام لشمولية وترابط الحقوق المدنية والسياسية والحقوق الثقافية والاجتماعية والاقتصادية. لقد أشار التقرير إلى الجهود الواضحة لتعزيز حرية الإعلام والصحافة، وذلك عبر مشروع قانون اتحادي جديد بشأن الأنشطة الإعلامية سيسمح بتدفق المعلومات وسيعطي مجالا أوسع للحريات الصحفية. ونود في هذا الإطار أن نتوجه بالسؤال التالي: ما هي الآليات التي اتبعتها دولة الإمارات في نشر ثقافة المشاركة السياسية؟ وختاما، يود وفد بلادي أن يوصي باستمرار الجهود لتطوير إطار قانوني عصري للإعلام يراعي المستجدات الاجتماعية والثقافية والسياسية ويحافظ ذات الأمان على مصالح الدولة والمجتمع. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de Lettonie.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Latvia welcomes the delegation of United Arab Emirates and thanks them for the comprehensive national report, its presentation today and their constructive engagement in the UPR process. We note with appreciation that United Arab Emirates has demonstrated its openness to cooperation with Human Rights Council special procedures, and since 2009, United Arab Emirates has received visits from 3 special procedures mandate holders: Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism, Special Rapporteur on the Sale of Children, and Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons. Considering previous positive cooperation of United Arab Emirates with special procedure mandate holders, Latvia recommends to United Arab Emirates to consider extending a standing invitation to all the special procedures of the Human Rights Council. Latvia also recommends to the United Arab Emirates to ratify the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and to fully align its legislation with all obligations under the Rome Statute, including incorporating the Rome Statute definition of crimes and general principles, as well as adopting provisions enabling cooperation with the court. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante du Liban. Excellence, s'il vous plaît.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
يرحب وفد بلادي بالوفد الموقر لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة برئاسة معالي الدكتور أنور محمد قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية، ويغتنم الفرصة ليحيي جهود واقتدار بعثة الإمارات في جنيف برئاسة سعادة السفير عبيد الزعابي وطاقم البعثة، ولا سيما نشاطهم الفاعل في إطار مجلس حقوق الإنسان. اطلع وفد بلادي باهتمام على التقرير الوطني الذي أعدته الإمارات ضمن الجولة الثانية من آلية الاستعراض الدوري الشامل، ولا يسعه إلا أن يرحب بالخطوات الملموسة المحرزة في اتجاه تطبيق التوصيات التي كانت قد تلقتها خلال الجولة الأولى للاستعراض عام 2008. السيد الرئيس، يود وفد بلادي أن يستفسر من وفد الإمارات عن التقدم الذي أحرزته الدولة في مجال تمكين المرأة ومشاركتها السياسية. من جهة ثانية، يود وفد بلادي أن يوصي بالاستمرار في بذل الجهود نحو تحقيق نظام يكفل قدرا أفضل من الحماية للأطفال، كما وتعزيز وتطوير حقوق المرأة وحمايتها. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de Libye.
سيد الرئيس، يود وفد ليبيا الترحيب بوفد دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الموقر، ويتقدم بالشكر إلى معالي وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية السيد أنور محمد قرقاش على العرض القيم الذي قدمه. سيد الرئيس، يثني وفد بلادي على العديد من الجوانب الإيجابية التي أرستها الإمارات في مجال تعزيز البنية التشريعية والمؤسساتية لحماية حقوق الإنسان من خلال وضع وتنفيذ حزمة من الاستراتيجيات والسياسات المتخصصة مبنية على أفضل الممارسات والمعايير الدولية بهدف تعزيز الحقوق والحريات في مجال هامة تتعلق بتعزيز وحماية حقوق الطفل والمرأة ومكافحة الاتجار بالبشر، واعتماد استراتيجية وطنية أولوياتها الارتقاء بنظم التعليم والرعاية الصحية والتركيز على التنمية وتطوير الخدمات الحكومية وتعزيز ونشر ثقافة حقوق الإنسان وتعزيز التعاون مع منظمات الحقوق المتخصصة والآليات الدولية لحقوق الإنسان بزيادة عدد المقررين الخاصين لها والانضمام إلى مزيد من الاتفاقيات والبروتوكولات الدولية في مجال حقوق الإنسان. في هذا السياق يود وفد بلادي أن تقدم التوصيات التالية: الاستمرار في تنفيذ برنامج التمكين السياسي التي تم إطلاقه في عام 2006، وذلك من خلال زيادة الوعي والتثقيف في المشاركة السياسية وحقوق الإنسان وفقا لأفضل الممارسات والمعايير في هذا المجال، إلى اهتمام خاص للاحتياجات الصحية للمرأة في المناطق الريفية من أجل الحصول على جودة الخدمات الصحية المتوافرة للمواطنين وغير المواطنين. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de Malaisie.
Thank you, Mr. President. Malaysia welcomes the delegation of the United Arab Emirates, led by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Muhammad Gargash, to the 15th session of the UPR Working Group, and thank them for the presentation of its national report. My delegation notes positively the significant progress in the promotion and protection of human rights, particularly in the strengthening of its domestic legislative and institutional frameworks that the UAE has achieved since its first UPR review. Malaysia lauds the UAE's efforts in its human rights awareness-raising program, the promotion and protection of rights of women and children, and the development of its rural areas. Malaysia further commends the UAE on its accession to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In the spirit of constructive engagement and cooperation, my delegation would like to make the following two recommendations for the consideration of the UAE. 1. To continue its positive approach towards the establishment of a national human rights institution in accordance with the Paris Principles, and 2. To continue enhancing its efforts on strengthening women's rights through its national strategy for the advancement of women 2013-2017. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant des Maldives.
Thank you, Mr. President. Maldives would like to welcome the distinguished delegation of United Arab Emirates, headed by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Muhammad Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. The Maldives commend UAE for its comprehensive national report and annex thereto, outlining the key achievements since the last review, including on crucial areas such as women's rights, human trafficking, labor rights, and strengthening of government institutions dealing with human rights. The Maldives would like to ask the following question from the distinguished delegation. Since the adoption of the last state report after the first cycle, what are the initiatives undertaken by the UAE to develop infrastructure in remote areas that would ensure the provisions of economic and social rights. Mr. President, the Moralists also would like to make the following recommendations. Number one, to pursue initiatives aimed at reinforcing the provision of economic, social, and cultural rights with a view to promote sustainable development and transition to green economy. Number two, to conclude the work initiated towards establishing a national human rights institution. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante de Mauritanie.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. يسرني في البداية باسم وفد بلادي أن أرحب بوفد الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة وعلى رأسه السيد الدكتور محمد قرقاش وزير الشؤون الخارجية. السيد الرئيس، لقد اطلعنا باهتمام بالغ على هذا العرض المتميز وما تضمنه من إنجازات هامة لا بد أن لها الدور الفعال في تطوير وحماية حقوق الإنسان. كما نثمن عاليا الخطوات الهامة التي قامت بها الحكومة والتي تعبر عن مدى التزامها بالعمل على تعزيز حقوق الإنسان وحمايتها، ويتجلى ذلك من خلال مصادقتها على العديد من المواثيق والاتفاقيات والصكوك الدولية في مجال حقوق الإنسان. السيد الرئيس، يثمن وفد بلادي ما قامت به الحكومة عبر المجالات الحيوية المتعلقة بالحياة اليومية لمواطنيها كحق التعليم والصحة والرعاية الاجتماعية وتحسين الظروف الحياتية بكل أنواعها، وكذلك العمل على المساواة بين الجنسين بتمكين المرأة من المشاركة في مختلف مناحي الحياة وضمان حقوق الطفل وكبار السن وذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة. وفي الختام، نصف دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة بدراسة تعديل القانون 51 حول مكافحة جرائم الاتجار بالبشر 2006، ونتمنى للحكومة وللشعب الإماراتي المزيد من التقدم والازدهار، وشكرا.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Mexique.
Gracias, señor presidente. México da la más cordial bienvenida a la delegación de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos y agradece la presentación de su informe nacional. Respecto a los progresos logrados desde el primer examen, México expresa su beneplácito por la creación de órganos gubernamentales e instituciones públicas para defender los derechos humanos en los Emiratos Árabes Unidos, así como por la normatividad adoptada para garantizar la protección de la integridad física y moral de la mujer y su participación en la vida política. Con base en el compromiso del gobierno emiratí por continuar mejorando la situación de los derechos humanos de su territorio, México recomienda: 1. Cooperar con las Naciones Unidas y otros mecanismos internacionales y regionales con miras a garantizar que las medidas legales y administrativas adoptadas para luchar contra el terrorismo respeten el disfrute de los derechos humanos y las libertades fundamentales, y considerar positivamente invitar al relator especial. 2. Resolver la situación de apatridia de las distintas poblaciones que habitan en el territorio mediante el reconocimiento de sus vínculos y larga residencia en el país. Y 3. Adoptar e implementar legislación específica en materia de racismo, discriminación racial, xenofobia y formas conexas de intolerancia, con especial énfasis en la protección de los trabajadores migrantes y sus familias. Gracias.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Monténégro. Excellence, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Montenegro warmly welcomes the delegation of United Arab Emirates and thanks for their comprehensive national report and the introductory statement. We commend the progress in the institution building area of human rights in the Emirates. The establishment of human rights departments in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Labour is a very positive development. Also, we would like to congratulate the UAE for the election in the Human Rights Council and express our conviction that our cooperation in the Council will be very successful. Montenegro notes the willingness of the government of the UAE to promote the role of women in the society and to fight against human trafficking, but we note with concern that some form of discrimination against women persists within the law and remains in practice. Montenegro would like to make the following recommendations: to consider establishing a moratorium on executions of death penalty with the aim of abolishing it; to further consider establishing an independent national human rights institution in accordance with the Paris Principles; and to consider ratifying the international instruments in the area of human rights. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Merci, Excellence. Je donne maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Maroc. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. يرحب المغرب بوفد دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة برئاسة معالي الدكتور أنور محمد قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية، ويهنئه على تقديم التقرير الوطني بموجب الدورة الآلية لاستعراض الدور الشامل. كما يشيد المغرب بالجهود المتميزة التي تبذلها دولة الإمارات العربية الشقيقة من أجل رعاية حقوق الإنسان وحمايتها في مختلف المجالات، كما تسجل بارتياح كبير المنجزات الهامة التي تم تحقيقها والتي تكفل التمتع الفعلي بمختلف الحقوق الأساسية سواء منها السياسية والمدنية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية والثقافية. كما ننوه بالعناية الخاصة التي توليها السلطات الإماراتية لهذه الآلية من خلال الحرص على تنفيذ تعهدات طوعية والعديد من التوصيات منذ اعتماد التقرير الأول من قبل مجلس حقوق الإنسان، وأخص بالذكر إنشاء اللجنة الدائمة لمتابعة كافة الالتزامات ذات الصلة. كما نثني على الخطوات التي تم اتخاذها لتنفيذ توصيات متعلقة بنشر ثقافة حقوق الإنسان من خلال إعداد وثيقة وطنية حول تطبيق منهج التربية على حقوق الإنسان على مستوى المنظومة المدرسية، وإدماج مبادئ ومقتضيات الصكوك الدولية لحقوق الإنسان ضمن برنامج معاهد التدريب والتأهيل والقضاء. وعلى ضوء ترحيب دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة باستقبال الفريق العامل المعني بحقوق الإنسان والأعمال، نرجو التفضل بتوضيح الخطوات التي قامت بها دولة الإمارات للتعريف بالمبادئ التوجيهية الخاصة بحقوق الإنسان وعلاقتها بقطاع الأعمال. وفي الختام نود أن نتقدم بتوصيتين: أولا تعزيز التعاون التقني والفني مع مكتب المفوضية السامي لحقوق الإنسان. ثانيا تنظيم مؤتمرات إقليمية ودولية بالتعاون مع المنظمات الإقليمية والدولية المعنية بحقوق الإنسان من أجل تبادل الآراء وممارسة الفضلة والتجارب في مجال تعزيز ثقة حقوق الإنسان.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Népal. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Mr. Vice President, Nepal welcomes the delegation of the United Arab Emirates led by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Muhammad Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, and thank them for the comprehensive presentation of the national report that outlines the efforts to follow up on the previous UPR and the situation of human rights in the country. My delegation appreciates the launching of a set of interrelated national policies and strategies, including the Emirates Vision 2021 and a strategy of the government for 2011-2013 that aims at ensuring the enjoyment of the fundamental human rights and freedoms. Significant efforts made in different fields of economic, social and cultural rights, particularly in the areas of empowerment of women, protection of the rights of the child, older persons and persons with disabilities, and promotion of education, healthcare and social welfare remain noteworthy. UAE has made significant progress in various fields that has resulted in encouraging development indices. We take positive note of the efforts made in improving the workers' rights and combating human trafficking. The government's serious consideration to the possibility of establishing a national human rights institution is encouraging. While taking note with satisfaction the accession of the UAE to some important international human rights instruments, my delegation would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Give continuity to strengthening of national human rights mechanisms. 2. Continue efforts to safeguarding the dignity and protecting the interest of migrant workers, including those through requisite institutional and legislative measures. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant des Pays-Bas. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Netherlands would like to thank the government of the United Arab Emirates for its national report and extensive explanation of the national human rights situation in the Emirates by His Excellency Dr. Gargash here today. The Netherlands commends the government of the United Arab Emirates on its developments in several areas within the field of human rights since the last review in 2008. However, the government of the Netherlands would still recommend the United Arab Emirates to become a party to the main international human rights treaties and therefore to ratify the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and to withdraw the unilateral declaration which seriously limits the scope of the definition of torture under the Convention Against Torture. Secondly, there are currently 92 states extending a standing invitation to the thematic special procedures. The Netherlands calls upon the United Arab Emirates to join these countries and recommends the United Arab Emirates to extend an open invitation to special procedures. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, Excellence. Je donne maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Nicaragua.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Permítame en primer lugar expresar una calurosa bienvenida a la delegación de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos a su segundo EPU y augurarle exitosos resultados del mismo. Mi delegación desea destacar que en seguimiento a su primer examen, los Emiratos Árabes Unidos han trabajado en tres cuestiones fundamentales: en la revisión y modificación de su marco normativo, en la reestructuración del aparato gubernamental o institucional y en el diseño de políticas orientadas a fortalecer su sistema de derechos humanos, particularmente los derechos de grupos vulnerables. Otro aspecto positivo por el cual felicitamos al Estado es el compromiso asumido mediante la ratificación de nuevos instrumentos internacionales de derechos humanos, como lo son la Convención contra la Tortura y la Convención sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad. Nicaragua desea a este respecto alentar al Estado para que continúe fortaleciendo su sistema de derechos humanos mediante la ratificación de nuevos instrumentos internacionales. Finalmente, quisiéramos recomendar a los Emiratos Árabes Unidos continuar haciendo esfuerzos para que cree la Defensoría del Pueblo conforme a los principios de París. Muchas gracias.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de Norvège.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome the delegation of the United Arab Emirates. Norway is concerned by the recent deterioration of freedom of expression in the UAE. We recommend the UAE to encourage freedom of expression and the press, including by amending the penal code to remove all criminal penalties for alleged libel offences. Norway is also concerned about reports of arbitrary detention and arrests. It is important that detainees are given full access to their fundamental legal rights and fair and humane treatment. We stress the importance of a fair and transparent legal process and recommend a release from custody of any individual detained solely on the basis of peaceful expression of political views. Norway welcomes reports of a forthcoming establishment of a national human rights institution. We recommend that the authorities clarify the mandate and scope of its proposed national human rights institution as per the Paris Principles. We recognize that certain steps have been taken to improve conditions for migrant workers in the UAE and encourage further implementation and enforcement of the UAE labor law. We recommend the implementation of legislation to regulate the living and working conditions of domestic workers and ensure that they are compatible with the standards of ILO Convention number 189. Finally, Norway has taken due note of the recent positive amendments to the law on citizenship as a first step to grant all children by Emirati women citizenship at birth. We recommend the UAE to continue strengthening protective measures and legal rights for women and children, including by giving women equal status to men in matters of divorce, inheritance and child custody. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant d'Oman. Excellence, je vous en prie.
في البداية أنا أتقدم بالشكر والتقدير لمعالي الدكتور محمد قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية رئيس وفد دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة والوفد المرافق له، ونشكره على العرض الشامل الذي أدلى به، حيث قدم صورة متكاملة وشاملة عن الإنجازات التي حققتها دولة الإمارات العربية في مجال تعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان. لقد اطلع وفد بلادي بكل اهتمام على ما جاء في التقرير الوطني لدولة الإمارات، وتبين لنا من خلال مضمونه بأنها تولي أهمية خاصة لتنفيذ توصيات الاستعراض الدوري الأول، كما يبين تجسيد اهتمام دولة الإمارات بحقوق الإنسان من خلال التزامها بالعمل وفق تعهداتها الدولية وتطبيقاتها على أرض الواقع للارتقاء بحقوق الإنسان بكل مسؤولية، وذلك من خلال إشراك جميع ذوي العلاقة سواء كانت جهات حكومية أو مؤسسات رسمية أو منظمات المجتمع المدني. سعادة الرئيس، تشهد دولة الإمارات مرحلة متميزة تتمثل في مضيها قدما نحو تنمية شاملة بل ومتسارعة في كافة المجالات، وهناك التزام متواصل وإرادة سياسية من قبل حكومة دولة الإمارات لتعزيز حقوق الإنسان التي يتمتع بها شعب الإمارات، ويظهر ذلك من خلال إصدارها التشريعات والقوانين التي تكفل الحقوق الأساسية للفرد كحقه في الصحة والتعليم والأمن والمساواة وعدم التمييز وحرية المعتقد وإبداء الرأي وغيرها. في هذا الصدد مزيد من الجهد الشان ويوصي بالعمل المجتمع المدني بدولة الإمارات في مجال حقوق الإنسان وتوفير الموارد اللازمة لقيامها بالأنشطة لنشر الوعي بمبادئ حقوق الإنسان، كما نوصي بإطلاق برامج إعلامية تعزز من مستويات التوعية بحقوق الإنسان. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank His Excellency Dr. Anwar Muhammad Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of the United Arab Emirates, for highlighting the efforts of his government to promote and protect human rights of its people. The establishment of the Standing Committee to follow up on the first UPR and preparation of national plan to fulfill national obligations reflect the commitment of the UAE to fulfill human rights obligations. Mr. President, Pakistan appreciates the UAE government's efforts for honoring its voluntary pledges through accession to the Convention Against Torture and UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We have also taken note of the domestic legislations concerning adoption of the Manual on General Standards for Shared Housing for Workers as well as care for children of unknown parentage. Mr. President, in conclusion, my delegation would like to make the following recommendations. Number one, to enhance ongoing efforts to strengthen the protection of foreign workers so as to ensure the continuous improvement of working and housing conditions while continuously monitoring labor law violations. Two, to continue to intensify cooperation with civil society organizations in order to debate on human rights issues and coordinate their follow-up and implementation on the ground. We wish the UAE success in its future endeavors. Thank you.
Je vous remercie. Maintenant, j'aimerais donner la parole à son Excellence le Dr Anwar Mohammad Gargash et à sa délégation afin de répondre aux questions soulevées jusqu'à présent. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Workers and labor continue, I think, to be a major issue, and I agree also with the comments on that. I believe that in the UAE this is for us a continuous work of improvement, of seeking to modernize legislation, and I very much welcome the comments by Indonesia and India in this regard. They are two of our big labor partners, and I think they are aware and are quite cognizant of the various improvements that we are having in the labor conditions, and I'm very heartened by these comments. I'm equally heartened also by the comments regarding our, I would say, greater transparency on our human rights records. I have to say that a large part of this is due to the UPR process. I think the UPR process has been an excellent tool for us to measure our progress, to build more capacity, to understand where our shortcomings are, and to build on it. For example, one of the areas that was raised by the representative from Morocco is on the public-private engagement on human rights, and we are working on that, and we had a workshop recently in Dubai as part of the World Economic Forum to also develop further, because as you know, we have a very large and quite dynamic process. I think part of also the work is that, as you mentioned here and mentioned by many others, we have seen this process whereby human rights become more and more part of the training of our police, various departments in government, the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry of Interior, various other ministries. Now, for example, the Federal National Council have had or have set up special departments to deal with human rights. I think this is a process of growing capacity. I think our report, its detail, its transparency is basically a testament to that, and the comments of various people who have read this report in this room tells me that we are on the right path, and that the UPR process has been actually a good guide for us in improving capacity.
We have received on the issue of rapporteurs, we welcome the visits of rapporteurs. We have received various rapporteurs and welcome these visits. And I think these visits, although at times might have critical elements, but they really end up in a very constructive, I think, engagement that we are able to build on and improve our process. On the issue of the recent group that was held in the UAE has had to deal with the challenge posed by the activities of extremist organizations. These organizations present a threat to the progressive agenda that the UAE is pursuing. They are not happy with our enablement of women. They are not happy with the issue of religious tolerance that the UAE pursues as a policy. They have, I think, a much more conservative and extremist views to these. We're not willing actually to abandon our progressive agenda for a small minority. However, these challenges will be dealt with through due process and in line with our constitution and with our legal framework. In this regard, I note that yesterday the Prosecutor General has announced that a group of this organization who has been detained is going to be is actually going through now the court process. Their cases have been sent to court. So basically we are going through that process. But I think in our protection of our progressive agenda, in our protection of issues such as tolerance, freedom of religion, women's rights, etc., we will protect our society, but protecting our society will be done through due process. I would like, on the issue of human trafficking, to turn to Dr. Saeed Al-Ghafli, who is the Secretary General of the Human Trafficking Committee in the UAE. Dr. Saeed, thank you.
شكرا معالي. فيما يتعلق بمكافحة جرائم الاتجار بالبشر في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، انطلقت الحملة الرسمية لدولة الإمارات في مواجهة هذه الجريمة بصدور القانون رقم 51 لسنة 2006. وقد أنشأت اللجنة الوطنية لمكافحة الاتجار البشري وفقا لقرار مجلس الوزراء رقم 15 لسنة 2007. وقد عملت اللجنة الوطنية على وضع استراتيجية وطنية تساير التوجهات الدولية في مكافحة الاتجار والاستراتيجيات العالمية في ذلك، حيث بنيت الاستراتيجية الوطنية على 4 محاور رئيسية. تمثل المحور الأول في تطوير التشريعات الوطنية فيما يتعلق بالاتجار بالبشر، وفي هذا الإطار قامت اللجنة بوضع العديد من القرارات المنفذة للقانون 51، وأهمها قرارين رئيسيين. تعلق الأول بكيفية تعامل المؤسسات التنفيذية مع ضحايا الاتجار بالبشر، وأتى القرار الثاني متعلق بكيفية تعامل الإعلام مع ضحايا الاتجار بالبشر في هذا الشأن. لقد أدركت اللجنة الوطنية أن صدور القانون 51 سيشكل أداة تحول في عمل العديد من المؤسسات التشريعية والقضائية في الدولة، ولذلك اهتمت بعنصر التدريب وتمكين القضاة ورجال النيابة في التعامل مع ضحايا الاتجار بالبشر، وذلك من خلال عقد العديد من الاتفاقيات وورش التدريب في هذا الشأن. تمثلت الركيزة الثانية من تمكين الجهات المعنية للقدرة على تنفيذ القانون 51 وتطبيق إجراءات رادعة وقوية لمكافحة الاتجار بالبشر. وقد عملت اللجنة الوطنية للتعامل مع جميع الجهات المعنية في الدولة وتكريس وإظهار جهودها في هذا المجال من خلال إصدار تقرير سنوي يتم من خلاله توضيح الجهود وتوضيح القضايا التي يتم التعامل معها في قضايا الاتجار بالبشر في الدولة. كذلك اهتمت اللجنة الوطنية من خلال المؤسسات الوطنية بالاهتمام بالضحايا وإعادة تأهيلهم ووضع البرامج المناسبة من خلال وجود عدد من الجهات التي تعمل على حماية الضحايا وإعادة تأهيلهم، وأهمها مراكز إيواء التي تم إنشائها تحت مظلة الهلال الأحمر، وكذلك مؤسسة دبي لرعاية النساء والأطفال والتي تعمل على تقديم الدعم والمساعدة القانونية والصحية والنفسية لضحايا الاتجار بالبشر. وتكمن الركيزة الرابعة في عمل اللجنة الوطنية من خلال التعاون الدولي سواء على المستوى الثنائي من خلال اتفاقيات ثنائية بين دولة الإمارات وعدد من الدول، وقد تم إلى الوقت الحاضر عقد اتفاقيتين أو مذكرتين تفاهم مع أرمينيا وأذربيجان. كما أن دولة الإمارات تدرك أهمية الانضمام إلى التجمعات الدولية، فانضمت إلى أصدقاء متحدون لمكافحة الاتجار بالبشر في نيويورك والتي برئاسة بيلاروسيا. من جانب آخر دعمت اللجنة الوطنية التوجهات الإقليمية سواء على مستوى الدول العربية في وضع الاستراتيجية العربية ووضع القانون العربي الاسترشادي، كما أنها عنصر فاعل في المبادرة العربية لبناء القدرات التي أطلقتها جامعة الدول العربية مع المؤسسة القطرية وكذلك مكتب الأمم المتحدة لمواجهة جرائم المخدرات الجريمة والمخدرات. شكرا.
Je remercie Son Excellence et sa délégation. Nous reprenons le débat interactif. Nous avons pris quelques retards et j'invite toutes les délégations à respecter scrupuleusement le temps de parole qui est, je vous le rappelle, d'1 minute 23 secondes. Le prochain orateur est le distingué représentant de l'État de Palestine. Excellence, je vous en prie.
يرحب وفد بلادي بوفد الإمارات العربية المتحدة الموقر برئاسة السيد أنور قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية، ويثمن دولة فلسطين الجهود المبذولة من قبل حكومة دولة الإمارات لرفع مستوى حقوق الإنسان في البلاد في عدة مجالات كحقوق المرأة ومكافحة التمييز العنصري والحق في التعليم وغيرها. ونثمن انضمام الإمارات إلى البروتوكول الخاص بقمع ومعاقبة الاتجار بالبشر وخاصة النساء والأطفال التابع لاتفاقية الأمم المتحدة لمكافحة الجريمة المنظمة. كما نشيد بإنشاء أقسام خاصة بحقوق الإنسان في عدة وزارات رئيسية بما في ذلك وزارة الخارجية والداخلية وقسم مكافحة الاتجار بالبشر في وزارة العمل. سيد الرئيس، يشيد وفد بلادي بالجهود المبذولة في مجال مكافحة الاتجار بالبشر حيث قامت الإمارات بتعديل بعض أحكام القانون بشأن مكافحته ولتوفير ضمانات أكبر لضحاياه، بالإضافة إلى تشكيل لجنة وطنية لمكافحة الاتجار بالبشر والتي من اختصاصها إبداء الرأي وتحديث التشريعات ذات الصلة. كما ونظمت اللجنة الوطنية لمكافحة الاتجار بالبشر مجموعة من الدورات التدريبية وورش العمل بالتعاون مع مختلف الإدارات والوزارات ذات الصلة بإنفاذ القانون. ومن أحد أهداف هذا البرنامج ضمان أن يكون المسؤولين القائمين في مجال مكافحة الاتجار بالبشر بالدولة على مستوى المعايير الدولية. وهنا نود أن نوصي الإمارات بالتالي: 1. مواصلة بذل الجهود لزيادة التعاون الدولي بغية الاطلاع على التجارب وأفضل ممارسات في مجال مكافحة الاتجار بالبشر. 2. تعزيز التعاون التقني والفني مع مكتب المفوضة السامية لحقوق الإنسان في مختلف المجالات ذات الصلة. 3. مواصلة تكثيف تعاونها مع آليات حقوق الإنسان التابعة للأمم المتحدة. شكرا.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant des Philippines. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Good afternoon and thank you, Mr. President. The Philippines welcomes the delegation of UAE led by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammed Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. My delegation notes the open and consultative process by which UAE prepared its second national UPR report. The Philippines acknowledges the great importance that UAE attaches to the promotion and protection of human rights. My delegation is pleased about UAE's positive domestic initiatives for the protection of the rights of migrant workers and victims of human trafficking. In particular, the Philippines welcomes the creation of the Human Rights Department at the Ministry of Interior and at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, respectively, as well as the establishment of the National Committee to Combat Trafficking. The Philippines lauded UAE for acceding to the Palermo Protocol on Trafficking in Persons. In this regard, it is recommended that UAE amend some provisions of Federal Law 51 of 2006 on combating human trafficking to align it better with the Palermo Protocol. Mr. President, the UAE is host to some 4 million migrant workers. My delegation welcomes the UAE's continuing deep concern for the well-being of migrant workers and the protection of their human rights. The Philippines also appreciates the UAE's active leadership and engagement with regional consultative processes on labor migration, such as the Abu Dhabi Dialogue and the Colombo process, towards developing regional standards for decent work, especially for migrant workers and female domestic workers. The Philippines recommends that UAE make a move to accede to the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and their Families, as well as of ILO Convention 189. In closing, Mr. President, the Philippines wishes the UAE well in its efforts to promote and protect human rights. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante du Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Let me start by extending a warm welcome to the delegation of the United Arab Emirates, led by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Muhammad Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, and thank him for the presentation of the UAE's national report. Portugal welcomes the UAE's commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and for the significant progress that has been made since the first UPR cycle. The strategic plan to combat human trafficking and the program of assistance for victims of human trafficking are but a couple of examples of this progress. Mr. Vice President, we particularly welcome the UAE's national strategy for the advancement of women, covering important areas such as health, education, and political participation. This is a significant development regarding the realization of human rights of women and their empowerment. Portugal commends the EAUs for the ratification of the Convention Against Torture and would like to recommend that the UAE continue on this positive track and ratifies the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, including its second protocol, and the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. I thank you.
Je vous remercie. Maintenant la parole à la distinguée représentante du Qatar. Excellence, je vous en prie.
يرحب وفد بلادي بمعالي الدكتور أنور محمد قرقاش رئيس وفد دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية والوفد المرافق له، ونثني على العرض الوافي والقيم الذي قدموه حول حالة حقوق الإنسان في بلادهم. بعد اطلاعنا وباهتمام كبير على ما ورد في التقرير الوطني لدولة الإمارات الشقيقة، نود أن نشيد بالجهود المتميزة التي تبذل على الصعيدين المؤسسي والتشريعي، ونثني على إنشاء العديد من المؤسسات والإدارات ضمن عدة وزارات رئيسية في الدولة، ومنها إدارة حقوق الإنسان في وزارتي الخارجية والداخلية، ووضع العديد من الاستراتيجيات الوطنية ومن أبرزها رؤية الإمارات ل 2021، وذلك من أجل النهوض بكافة حقوق الإنسان والحريات الأساسية وحمايتها وتعزيزها. ونعرب عن تقديرنا لتنفيذ دولة الإمارات التعهدات الطوعية التي قدمتها خلال الاستعراض الدوري الشامل الأول، والانضمام إلى العدد من الصكوك الدولية لحقوق الإنسان كاتفاقية مناهضة التعذيب واتفاقية حقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة. كذلك نود أن ننوه إلى التفاعل الإيجابي الذي أبدته حكومة الإمارات مع معظم التوصيات الصادرة حينها، مما يعكس مدى توفر الإرادة السياسية والنية الصادقة في التعامل مع هذه التوصيات والعمل على تحويلها إلى إنجازات فعلية على أرض الواقع. يود وفد بلادي أن يتقدم بالتوصيتين التاليتين: 1. وضع خطط وبرامج تدريب في مجال حقوق الإنسان من أجل نشر الوعي لدى العاملين في القطاع الحكومي وبشكل خاص موظفي إنفاذ القانون وأعضاء السلطة القضائية. 2. مواصلة الجهود في مجال الحق في التعليم والعمل على توفير الموارد اللازمة للارتقاء به وزيادة جودته. وشكرا.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Arabie Saoudite. Excellence, je vous en prie.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
يسرني باسم وفد بلادي الترحيب بحضور معالي السيد أنور محمد قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية والوفد المرافق له، كما نشكره على ما ورد في بيانه من معلومات تستحق الإشادة حول أوضاع حقوق الإنسان في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة. وانتهز الفرصة لأعبر عن بالغ التقدير للجهود المميزة لأخي العزيز السفير عبيد الزعابي في جميع فعاليات الأمم المتحدة في جنيف. سيد الرئيس، إن دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة تثبت للعالم تعاونها مع كل الإجراءات والآليات المنبثقة عن نظام حقوق الإنسان، ويبين التقرير الوطني لدولة الإمارات حرصها التام على استمرار التعاون مع الآليات الدولية، بما في ذلك انضمامها لعدد من الصكوك الدولية المتعلقة بحقوق الإنسان. كما وضح التقرير الرغبة الحقيقية في استمرار الإصلاح الاجتماعي والسياسي الذي يتطلع له الشعب الإماراتي من خلال تطوير وإصلاح جهاز القضاء والعدالة، وأيضا تعزيز عمل المؤسسات الوطنية المعنية بحقوق الإنسان. من الخطوات الإيجابية التي اتخذتها دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة تؤكد على الرغبة الصادقة لهذا البلد الشقيق في إرساء نظام يضمن للشعب الإماراتي حياة كريمة ومستقبل مشرف. يتقدم في بلادي بالتوصيات التالية: استمرار ومواصلة الإصلاحات القانونية والتشريعية على المستوى الوطني لتعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان وفقا للمعايير الدولية وبما ينسجم مع القيم الثقافية للشعب الإماراتي. ثانيا، تعزيز الجهود الرامية لنشر ثقافة حقوق الإنسان من خلال المناهج التعليمية ووسائل الإعلام. السيد الرئيس، يتمنى وفد بلادي كل التقدم والازدهار والرقي لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة ولشعبها الكريم، وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Sénégal.
Je félicite son Excellence le Dr Anwar Mohamed Gargash, ministre d'État en charge des Affaires étrangères, pour la présentation de qualité du rapport national des Émirats arabes unis et les informations supplémentaires s'y rapportant dans le cadre de cette 15e session du groupe de travail sur l'examen périodique universel. Ma délégation note avec satisfaction que les recommandations issues de l'examen de 2008 ont fait l'objet d'un suivi appréciable et d'un bon niveau de mise en œuvre pour celles acceptées. En effet, parmi les avancées significatives enregistrées par les Émirats arabes unis, il est heureux de relever les performances réalisées en termes de développement humain, ainsi que la promotion des droits des femmes, avec une participation plus effective à la vie publique, politique, économique et sociale. Ma délégation salue par ailleurs les dispositions relatives au renforcement de la lutte contre la traite des êtres humains. Sur un autre chapitre, le rapport national met en exergue les mesures tendant à améliorer la situation des travailleurs migrants. C'est fort de ce constat que ma délégation, pour conclure, recommande la poursuite des efforts tendant à renforcer la protection des droits des travailleurs migrants. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. Je donne maintenant la parole au représentant de Serbie. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Mr. Vice President, Serbia welcomes the delegation of United Arab Emirates and its participation in the second UPR, and we thank the government for elaborating national reports. We commend the efforts of the UEA in the field of protection of children's rights, in particular through the Children's Rights Bill. Serbia recommends the adoption of this bill and further efforts towards the accession to the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict. We note with appreciation the activities of the National Committee to Combat Human Trafficking and the adoption of the strategic plan. Furthermore, Serbia welcomes the national program of assistance for victims of human trafficking, in particular the opening of residential and psycho-support centers for victims of human trafficking. We also commend the continuing respect of international refugee protection standards, including the essential principle of non-refoulement. Finally, Serbia acknowledges the commitment of the United Arab Emirates to further advance the human rights situation in the country and beyond, and we wish the government every success in this endeavor. Thank you.
Merci, Excellence. Je La parole à la distinguée représentante de Singapour. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Singapore warmly welcomes the high-level UAE delegation and appreciates UAE's constructive participation in the UPR. We take positive note of the UAE's continued efforts in the protection of human rights. In particular, we note its achievement in promoting gender equality. UAE ranks high in the World Economic Forum's Gender Equality Index. In addition to high enrollment rates of girls in schools and universities, the Cabinet has, since last December, made it compulsory for corporations and government agencies to include women in their boards of directors. Singapore recommends that the UAE continues its efforts to promote gender equality and eliminate discrimination against women and girls. We also note the progress made in combating human trafficking. UAE has set up a national committee to combat human trafficking and developed a comprehensive strategy against this scourge. Training workshops were conducted for law enforcement officers. There are also remedies, counseling and protection for victims of trafficking. We recommend that the UAE continues to strengthen its national institutions to combat human trafficking. In conclusion, we wish UAE continued success. Thank you.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Slovaquie.
Mr. President, I would like to warmly welcome the delegation of the United Arab Emirates and thank for the presentation of the national report. Slovakia commends UAE for ratifying the CRPD CAT as well as the Palermo Protocol. My delegation has also taken a positive note of the high levels of education attained by the UAE citizens and similar enrollment rates for both girls and boys at all phases of education. Slovakia welcomes the progress in reducing the statelessness by allowing the Emirati women married to foreigners to pass on their citizenship to their children. Noteworthy is also the establishment of human rights departments in several ministries. Slovakia would like to make the following recommendations: to establish a moratorium on executions with a view to abolish death penalty entirely, especially with regards to juvenile offenders; to address the discrimination against non-citizens, particularly concerning domestic workers, granting them equal protection and rights as to its own citizens; to consider ratifying all three optional protocols to the CRC, and last but not least, to ratify the Rome Statute of the ICC and to accede to its agreement on privileges and immunities. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante de Slovénie.
Mr. President, Slovenia welcomes the distinguished delegation of the United Arab Emirates and thanks for the preparation and presentation of the national report, as well as for the commitment to the UPR process. Since the first UPR cycle, we welcome the accession of the United Arab Emirates to several human rights treaties such as CAT, CRPD. We also welcome the intention of United Arab Emirates to accede to the optional protocols 1 and 2 to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. In the first UPR cycle, we recommended putting in place effective institutional support for the victims of domestic violence, so we welcome the fact that the government has established institutions such as shelters for women and children to protect them from domestic violence. We continue to recommend the United Arab Emirates to withdraw the reservation to the International Convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, in particular Articles 2F, 9, and 15, paragraph 2. We recommend to the United Arab Emirates to ratify the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie Son Excellence et je donne la parole au représentant d'Espagne.
Vicepresidente, España da una cordial bienvenida a la delegación de Emiratos Árabes Unidos y agradece su participación en este ejercicio, así como la presentación realizada por Su Excelencia, el Secretario de Estado, Dr. Gargash. Mi delegación felicita a Emiratos Árabes por el compromiso mostrado con el examen periódico universal,
que se ha traducido en la elaboración de un plan nacional en ejecución de las recomendaciones del primer examen. Resultado del mismo han sido las ratificaciones en 2012 de la Convención Internacional contra la Tortura y la Convención sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad. Continuando con dicho compromiso, a mi delegación le gustaría realizar las siguientes recomendaciones. Ratificar el Pacto Internacional de Derechos Civiles y Políticos y el Pacto Internacional de Derechos Económicos, Sociales y Culturales. 2. Abolir la pena de muerte y ratificar el segundo protocolo facultativo de derechos civiles y políticos. 3. Tomar las medidas necesarias para armonizar la normativa tradicional y la estatutaria, con el objetivo de seguir eliminando las excepciones establecidas al principio de no discriminación por razón de sexo, reforzando la protección de las mujeres, especialmente de las trabajadoras domésticas. Y 4. Seguir intensificando los esfuerzos para combatir todos los casos de tortura y o malos tratos o penas crueles, inhumanas o degradantes, poniendo en marcha el mecanismo de verificación nacional que permita llevar las denuncias ante la justicia y ratificar el protocolo facultativo de la Convención Internacional contra la Tortura. Gracias, señor vicepresidente.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante du Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka warmly welcomes the delegation of the United Arab Emirates led by His Excellency Dr. Anwar Gargash, Minister of State of Foreign Affairs to the UPR Working Group. Sri Lanka is encouraged by the several national policies and strategies undertaken by the UAE government as a response to the population's social needs. The Emirates Vision 2021 and the government strategy for 2011 to 2013 are noteworthy in this regard. We commend the emphasis placed in these strategies on education, healthcare, housing, and efforts to develop infrastructure in remote areas of the country. Sri Lanka commends efforts by the UAE to promote and protect the rights of the child, including through the implementation of recommendations made during its first UPR, in particular the successful closure of the dossier on child jockeys in the country. We take special note of the UAE's commitment to promote women's rights. The many initiatives aimed at the economic, social, and political empowerment of women will also bring the country closer to achieving MDG 3. We welcome the various initiatives undertaken by the UAE government to protect and promote the rights of migrant workers, particularly the strategy and plan of action formulated by the Ministry of Labour to improve their working and living conditions. In conclusion, Sri Lanka recommends that the UAE continue to place importance on secure economic development, including through infrastructure development in rural areas, in order to ensure that people living in these areas fully enjoy their economic and social rights. We wish the UAE all success in its UPR engagement. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Je vous remercie et je donne la parole au distingué représentant du Soudan.
رحب وفد السودان بوفد دولة الإمارات العربية الشقيقة برئاسة معالي السيد الدكتور أنور محمد قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية، ويشكرهم جميعا على العرض الضافي الذي قدموه للتقرير الوطني، كما يشيد بالنهج التشاوري المتبع في إعداد التقرير وعرضه على فعاليات المجتمع الإماراتي عبر شبكة الإنترنت قبل تقديمه. سيد الرئيس، اطلع وفد السودان باهتمام على التقرير الوطني ولاحظ التقدم المحرز في العمل على الوفاء بالتعهدات الطوعية وتنفيذ التوصيات التي قبلتها دولة الإمارات خلال عملية المراجعة في الدورة الأولى. وهنا نثمن إنشاء عدد من المؤسسات المعنية بترقية وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان في الدولة، ومن بينها مكتب ثقافة احترام القانون الذي يقوم بدور توعوي هام في إطار نشر الثقافة القانونية، واللجنة العليا لحماية الطفل التي قادت إلى إنشاء مركز حماية الطفل بوزارة الداخلية في العام 2011. ويشير وفد بلادي بكثير من التقدير إلى الجهود التي تبذلها دولة الإمارات في مجال تعزيز حقوق المرأة وتحقيق المساواة، كما يشجع الجهود الجارية لتحديث الاستراتيجية الوطنية لتقدم المرأة ويدعو إلى إنجازها في أقرب ما يمكن. وفي هذا الإطار يطيب لوفدي أن يتقدم لدولة الإمارات بالتوصيتين التاليتين: 1. مواصلة إيلاء العناية لدعم المساواة بين الجنسين والقضاء على التمييز ضد المرأة. 2. مواصلة العمل من أجل رفع نسبة تمثيل المرأة في مواقع القيادة وصنع القرار. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante de Suède.
Welcomes the UAE delegation to the UPR, and thank you for presenting your national report as well as answering our advanced questions. Sweden is concerned about the latest developments in the UAE with regard to freedom of expression. The UAE guarantees freedom of expression in its constitution, but has not yet signed the ICCPR. The government has also taken action to severely restrict citizens' freedom of expression on the Internet, such as the federal decree to combat cybercrime. Sweden would like to emphasize that freedom of expression should be applied also on the Internet. Sweden recommends the UAE government to take immediate steps to ensure that the national regulations relating to the Internet guarantees freedom of expression. In the 2008 UPR, the UAE was recommended to step up efforts to ensure economic, social and cultural rights of migrant workers. Since then, the UAE has accepted recommendations to better provide for the protection of migrant workers. However, there are still reports of continuous abuse of employers and sponsors violating the rights of migrant as well as domestic workers, sometimes resulting in long, unregulated working hours, poor living conditions and non-payment of wages. Sweden recommends the UAE government to take further steps to ensure the economic rights of migrant workers and domestic workers by implementing minimum wages and regulated working hours for all work categories. Further, Sweden recommends the UAE to ensure that employers and sponsors fully respect the social and cultural rights of migrant workers and domestic workers, the right to housing and an adequate standard of living, and the right to education and training. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de Suisse.
Monsieur le Président, la Suisse souhaite la bienvenue à la délégation des Émirats arabes unis et la remercie pour son rapport national ainsi que sa présentation. Notre pays souhaite faire la recommandation sur 3 points. La Suisse estime la ratification de la Convention contre la torture et autres peines ou traitements cruels, inhumains ou dégradants par les Émirats arabes unis en 2012 comme un pas très positif et important. Néanmoins, la Suisse recommande aux Émirats arabes unis de retirer ses réserves ainsi que sa déclaration concernant ladite convention et recommande de ratifier le protocole facultatif à cette convention. La Suisse regrette que les Émirats arabes unis n'aient pas ratifié certains instruments internationaux fondamentaux pour la protection des droits de l'homme. La Suisse recommande aux Émirats arabes unis de ratifier le pacte international relatif aux droits civils, politiques, ainsi que le pacte international relatif aux droits économiques, sociaux et culturels. La Suisse constate que la peine de mort n'est que rarement appliquée aux Émirats arabes unis. Nous recommandons donc l'instauration immédiate d'un moratoire sur la peine de mort comme premier pas vers l'abolition de la peine capitale. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Thaïlande. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Mr. President, as a member of the Troika, Thailand warmly welcomes the delegation of the UAE to the UPR Working Group and thanks them for the presentation made. Thailand applauds the UAE's efforts to take comprehensive and concrete steps to follow up on accepted recommendations and pledges made at the first cycle of its UPR. These include, among others, the accession to various UN conventions, the improvement of domestic legislative framework, and the capacity building of human rights-related stakeholders. Additionally, we acknowledge the efforts made to combat trafficking in persons at the national and bilateral levels. In this regard, we recommend the full implementation of the recently adopted legislation and strategy on combating trafficking in persons to ensure effective provision of assistance, rehabilitation, and reintegration for victims of trafficking, particularly women and children, and the bringing of perpetrators to justice. We also appreciate steps taken to safeguard and improve the working and living conditions of migrant workers, including the adoption of a strategy and plan of action on the promotion of workers' rights and the dissemination of the rights and obligations of workers booklet in 7 languages to raise public awareness. Here we recommend the UAE to ensure full implementation of said strategy and plan of action to guarantee fair and equal wages. We also recommend that appropriate follow-up measures be set up in this regard. Lastly, we wish the UAE much success in the second cycle of its UPR. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, Excellence. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant du Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma délégation salue la présence parmi nous de la délégation des Émirats arabes unis et remercie le chef de délégation pour les informations complémentaires contenues dans sa déclaration liminaire. Le Togo salue également la détermination des autorités émiriennes à progresser dans la voie de la promotion et de la protection des droits de l'homme à travers la mise en œuvre et le suivi des recommandations issues du premier examen de l'EPU et à travers la création d'une commission permanente de suivi du rapport périodique universel. Ma délégation prend note avec intérêt des adhésions des Émirats arabes unis à la Convention contre la torture et autres peines ou traitements cruels, inhumains ou dégradants, à la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées et au protocole additionnel à la Convention des Nations unies contre la criminalité transnationale organisée visant à prévenir, réprimer, punir la traite des personnes, en particulier des femmes et des enfants. Le Togo encourage les Émirats arabes unis à poursuivre ses efforts en vue de l'adhésion au protocole facultatif à la Convention relative aux droits de l'enfant et recommande la création d'une institution nationale des droits de l'homme conformément à son engagement pris lors du premier examen. Le Togo recommande par ailleurs aux Émirats arabes unis de ratifier le pacte international relatif aux droits civils et politiques. Monsieur le Président, ma délégation prend note avec satisfaction des efforts déployés par les Émirats arabes unis dans le cadre de la promotion des droits des femmes et de leur autonomisation, notamment la stratégie nationale pour l'avancement de la femme 2013-2017. Toutefois, ma délégation recommande aux Émirats arabes unis de modifier le droit de la famille en éliminant les discriminations qui existent entre hommes et femmes et de lutter efficacement contre les violences familiales. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant de Tunisie. Excellence, je vous en prie.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. يرحب وفد بلادي بوفد دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الذي يقوده السيد أنور قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية، ويثمن عاليا الأهمية التي يوليها هذا البلد الشقيق إلى آلية الاستعراض الدوري الشامل، وأخص بالذكر جهود السفير عبيد الزعايبي. وتأخذ تونس علما بالإجراءات التي اتخذتها دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة منذ الدورة الأولى للاستعراض الدوري الشامل سنة 2008، وخاصة التعديل الدستوري لسنة 2009 وإحداث عديد اللجان والهياكل المعنية بحقوق الإنسان والمصادقة على اتفاقيتي حقوق المعاقين ومناهضة التعذيب. وتوصي تونس بالتعجيل في استكمال الإجراءات المصادقة على البروتوكولين الإضافيين لاتفاقية حقوق الطفل ودراسة إمكانية سحب بعض التحفظات على هذه الاتفاقية. كما توصي تونس بالإسراع بإتمام الدراسات المتعلقة بإنشاء مؤسسة وطنية لحقوق الإنسان وفق مبادئ باريس، وبدراسة إمكانية التصديق على بروتوكول إضافي لاتفاقية مناهضة التعذيب. وتلاحظ تونس بارتياح الجهود التي تبذلها دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة لتعزيز حقوق الإنسان وحمايتها، وخاصة فيما يتعلق بتحقيق المساواة بين الجنسين وبنشر ثقافة حقوق الإنسان وتحسين ظروف العيش المواطنين وإقامة الأجانب. وتشجع تونس على مواصلة الجهود في هذه المجالات ومن أجل تعزيز الإطار القانوني لحقوق الإنسان من خلال النظر في المصادقة على الاتفاقيات الرئيسية الأخرى، وخاصة العهدين الدوليين لحقوق المدنية والسياسية والحقوق الاقتصادية والاجتماعية والثقافية وقانون روما الأساسي. وتنفيذا لقرار مجلس حقوق الإنسان رقم 38/19 توصي تونس دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة بالعمل على مواصلة جهودها قصد الاستجابة لطلبات استعادة الأموال المنهوبة إلى أصحابها والتعاون لتسليم المورطين في انتهاكات حقوق الإنسان وقضايا الفساد. وشكرا على حسن الانتباه.
Je vous remercie, Excellence. Je donne maintenant la parole au distingué représentant de Turquie.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to warmly welcome the Emirati delegation and thank them for their detailed national report and its successful presentation. Turkey has excellent bilateral relationship and cooperation with United Arab Emirates. We happily observe the constant progress of UAE in all fields. We welcome the Emirati government's spirit of cooperation and efforts to comply with the recommendations presented at the first round of UPR mechanism. In this respect, especially national policies and strategies to empower women within the society, promotion of migrant workers' rights, and the strategic plan to combat human trafficking are worth mentioning and commendable. In this vein, we would like to recommend the Emirati government to continue its ongoing efforts to further increase the attendance of girls in secondary and higher education, and the participation of women in professional and political spheres. Also regarding the rights of workers, we recognize that the Emirati government is pursuing a goodwill strategy to enhance the rights and conditions of workers, including the migrant workers, hand in hand with an awareness-raising campaign for migrant workers. We recommend the Emirati government to continue these efforts. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole à son Excellence M. Anwar Mohammad Gargash et à sa délégation afin de répondre aux questions soulevées jusqu'ici. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the comments by the various distinguished speakers. I would like to address, there were several comments on our cybercrime law. The UAE is one of the most internet-savvy countries in the Arab world, and as a result, it was only natural that federal law, decree law number 5 of 2012 on combating cybercrime was introduced. This law addresses many of the threats to human rights, freedoms, and personal integrity arising from the use or misuse of the internet, which have caused concern to countries around the world. For example, the law criminalizes and provides sanction for use of the internet for the purpose of human trafficking, for trafficking in organs, drug trafficking, money laundering, promotion of racial hatred or sectarianism, terrorism, and extortion. It also provides sanction on pornography, prostitution, defamation, credit card fraud, identity, theft, slander, forgery, trafficking in antiquities or archaeological artifacts, and invasion of privacy. The enactment of the cybercrimes law will not only serve to protect the public from some of the most heinous and increasingly common forms of violent and financial crime, but it will also address some of the crimes such as those related to human trafficking and money laundering, in relation to which the UAE has been urged in the past to take further and stronger measures of prevention and punishment. The law also addresses other matters related to social and public order and national security. For instance, it provides the possibility of a criminal sanction for the use of the internet for organizing a demonstration without a license, for calling for the overthrow of the government, for insulting the UAE's rulers or the country's flag, for calling on others to willfully disobey law, or for seeking to damage the interests of the state by providing inaccurate or false information to any organization. We fully appreciate that such matters may be sensitive and can lead to healthy and vigorous debate, particularly with respect to fears about restrictions on the freedom of speech. While the UAE has never shied away from such a debate, it is another thing altogether to distort the content of this law, as some have recently done. For example, it does not ban Emiratis from providing information to independent journalists and human rights organizations, which is clearly a distortion, or to question the country's commitment to the rule of the law and the respect of the human rights and freedoms, because it enacts laws which seek to preserve public order and national security at the most basic level. It is the duty of any state to its citizens to do the same to one degree or another, and in this regard the UAE is certainly not alone. For example, it is a crime punishable by imprisonment, and in many other countries in similar instances. I would also like to address the comments that were made by some of our neighbors, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, on increasing and further strengthening issues to do with the culture of human rights and training of human rights. And I assure our friends and neighbors that we are working on these and we consider this a priority. Comments on labor continue also to dominate the debate, and this is understandable because of the demographic nature in the UAE. We are introducing the domestic workers law this year. It is in the final stages of our legislative process. This will close a big gap on issues of protection of workers, etc. This is a continuous effort for us. I think over the past 4 years we have shown healthy interest in promoting the right of workers. We will continue to do this, and we realize that this is a dynamic file. This will always entail further and further work for us on our side. I would like next to turn to Mrs. Afra Al-Basti, who is the head of the Dubai Women's Association. She will speak on her experience on human trafficking and domestic violence. Thank you.
Mr. President, shelters around UAE provides a 24-hour hotline plus the holistic services such as immediate shelter and a safe place too. Case management and support planning is one of the services that the shelters are provide around UAE. Counseling, social counseling, psychological and legal services are provided in these shelters too. Other support services to empower the victims such as vocational, recreational training, especially classes in English, basic English and maths will be provided for victims of human trafficking. These shelters also work and liaise in joint efforts with IOM, UNHCR, and referral mechanism and asylum too, in regards of the victims. Also, these shelters join efforts with NGOs in country of origin to support victims in future planning and safe return home. These are the services that these shelters provide for victims of human trafficking. Thank you.
Merci Son Excellence et sa délégation. Nous poursuivons le débat interactif avec l'intervention du distingué représentant du Turkménistan. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, we would like to extend a warm welcome to the distinguished delegation of UAE and thank His Excellency Dr. Anwar Muhammad Gargash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, for presenting a comprehensive update on the efforts undertaken by the government of UAE to improve the human rights situation on the ground. We note with appreciation that the government of UAE in 2010 established a standing committee to follow up on the Universal Periodic Review report. Since its first UPR review, UAE acceded to the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Protocol to Prevent, Suppress and Punish Trafficking Persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. We are pleased to note that UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and a number of special procedures visited UAE at the invitation of the government. We welcome the efforts of the government of UAE for creating an enabling environment for the promotion and protection of human rights, that is, independent judiciary, free media, and vibrant civil society. Mr. President, to further accelerate the progress in areas of promotion and protection of human rights, we would like to propose the following recommendations. To further develop legislation and practices in the media sector to strengthen the right of freedom of expression, and continue its ongoing review of national laws to ensure that they are in line with international human rights obligations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe maintenant la parole au représentant d'Allemagne. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Mr. President, thank you, Minister, for your comprehensive report. Germany had 2 questions. You have partially answered the first concerning combating information technology crimes. Still, a question remains, does this legislation contain safeguards against undue infringements on freedom of expression? My second question would be, Germany would like to know how far the process of accession to the first 2 optional protocols to the Convention on the Rights of the Child has already advanced and when the UAE intend to ratify the aforementioned protocols. I would like to express 2 recommendations, as many colleagues have done already. First, Germany recommends that the UAE government take decisive action to promote the rights of female citizens in order to achieve legal equality between men and women in terms of marriage, divorce, inheritance and child custody. Finally, Germany would like to recommend amending the penal code in order to repeal the right of a husband to punish his wife and the right of parents or custodians to punish their minor children by means of physical violence or coercion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, Excellence. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant des États-Unis d'Amérique.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United States welcomes His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammed Gargash and the delegation of the United Arab Emirates. We commend the UAE for improving some protections for migrant workers, including implementing procedures to identify victims of forced labor. Additionally, we commend steps the UAE is taking to protect children and women, including educational campaigns on domestic violence and harassment faced by children with disabilities, and the virtual global task force protecting children from online abuse and sexual exploitation. However, we remain concerned that political activists have been arrested and held without charge. We expect the government to meet its commitment to bring detainees to a fair trial in a timely and transparent manner. We are also concerned about the expanded regulations and punishments against individuals criticizing rulers or calling for demonstrations online. These violate the principles of freedom of expression. Finally, we are deeply concerned by the discrimination and violence against LGBT individuals, as well as reports of their detention, imprisonment, and deportation. The United States makes the following recommendations. 1. Allow individuals the right to associate freely and provide expeditious due process for all those accused of crimes. 2. Conduct a public consultation on the cybercrime law to ensure that the law does not prevent free speech and expression, including religious expression. And 3. Protect the human rights of all individuals, including LGBT individuals, and take appropriate steps to help ensure that protection is provided to the victim and perpetrators are identified and prosecuted. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, Madame. Je donne maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Uruguay.
Gracias, señor vicepresidente. Uruguay da la bienvenida a la distinguida delegación de Emiratos Árabes Unidos y agradece el compromiso de cooperación con el mecanismo del EPU. Destacamos los avances institucionales dentro del Gobierno que incorporaron la dimensión de los derechos humanos, el Plan Estratégico para el Combate a la Trata de Personas, la Estrategia Nacional sobre Maternidad e Infancia, la adhesión a la Convención contra la Tortura y a la Convención sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad, así como los avances verificados en materia de derechos económicos y sociales. En virtud de tratarse de un país signatario del Estatuto de Roma, Uruguay recomienda respetuosamente ratificar el Estatuto de Roma de la Corte Penal Internacional y adherirse al acuerdo sobre los privilegios e inmunidades de la Corte Penal Internacional. Aun cuando se evidencian adelantos, siguen existiendo disposiciones legales que van en detrimento de los derechos de la mujer. Uruguay recomienda retirar sus reservas al artículo 16 de la CEDAW e introducir reformas legislativas que otorguen iguales derechos a la mujer en materia de matrimonio, divorcio, relaciones de propiedad, custodia de los hijos y herencia. La situación de los defensores de derechos humanos en el país es compleja y se ha visto deteriorada. Uruguay recomienda ajustar las leyes existentes que rigen las organizaciones no gubernamentales para adaptarlas al derecho y las normas internacionales de derechos humanos. Muchas gracias.
Merci. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Ouzbékistan.
Благодарю вас, господин председатель. Позвольте приветствовать делегацию Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов во главе с его превосходительством доктором Анваром Гаргаш и выразить благодарность за представление второго национального доклада по УПО. Узбекистан приветствует тот факт, что с момента рассмотрения предыдущего национального доклада страна в соответствии с принятыми рекомендациями присоединилась к ряду международных правовых инструментов в области обеспечения прав и свобод человека, включая Конвенцию против пыток и других жестоких, бесчеловечных и унижающих достоинство видов обращения и наказания. Осуществляется работа по присоединению к факультативным протоколам Конвенции о правах ребенка, касающихся торговли детьми, детской проституции и детской порнографии и участия детей в вооруженных конфликтах. Наша делегация позитивно оценивает предпринимаемые ОАЭ меры по предупреждению и противодействию торговли людьми, в частности, присоединение страны к протоколу о предупреждении и пресечении торговли людьми, особенно женщинами и детьми, и наказании за нее. В этой связи мы хотели бы узнать от делегации ОАЭ о дальнейших планах страны по развитию международного сотрудничества в этом направлении. В заключение наша делегация желает успехов в проведении обзора текущего доклада ОАЭ и последующем выполнении рекомендаций по его итогам. Благодарю за внимание.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant du Venezuela. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Damos la bienvenida a la ilustre delegación de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos y agradecemos la presentación realizada por Su Excelencia Anwar Mohamed Gargash, Ministro de Estado para las Relaciones Exteriores. Valoramos los avances de su gobierno en el cumplimiento de las recomendaciones del EPU. Vamos a referirnos al derecho a la salud, tema al que Venezuela, al igual que los Emiratos Árabes Unidos, otorga especial atención por ser un derecho social fundamental, cuya garantía de acceso constituye un deber inalienable de todos los Estados. Su gobierno ha incrementado significativamente el presupuesto asignado a la salud para brindar un servicio de alta calidad a su población, con una excelente red de 65 hospitales y más de 150 centros de atención primaria de salud. También está implementando programas estratégicos para combatir las enfermedades crónicas y contagiosas y exhibe una importante reducción de la tasa de mortalidad infantil, de 6.7 muertes por cada 1000 nacidos vivos. Recomendamos a su gobierno continuar profundizando sus esfuerzos para consolidar los progresos alcanzados en el área de salud. Para finalizar, deseamos realizar una pregunta a la ilustre delegación de Emiratos Árabes Unidos. ¿Cuáles son los esfuerzos adelantados por su país en materia de protección a las personas con VIH-Sida? Mucho éxito a esa delegación.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant du Vietnam. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Joining other delegations, Vietnam warmly welcomes and thanks the delegation of the United Arab Emirates, headed by His Excellency Foreign Minister Anwar Mohamed Gargash, for the detailed presentation this afternoon. Vietnam commends the UAE's serious commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights as well as to this UPR process. Vietnam notes with satisfaction that over the last 4 years, the UAE has made numerous measures in building and improving the legal and institutional framework for human rights, including the establishment of the Human Rights Department, the Committee to Combat Human Trafficking, as well as a set of national strategies in advancement of the rights of women and children. Vietnam is also pleased to see the UAE featuring well on the list of international human rights-related index in areas of human development and in the rule of law. Applauding her contributions to the international cooperation on human rights and her efforts in ensuring all human rights, Vietnam shares the UAE's view that no country can pretend a perfect human rights record. In a constructive spirit, Vietnam recommends the UAE further improve her policies and follow-up measures to foster justice, equality, tolerance, as well as the full guarantee of human rights for the vulnerable groups, in particular women and migrant workers. To conclude, Vietnam wishes the UAE well and greater success, and I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe la parole à la distinguée représentante d'Algérie.
السيد نائب الرئيس، يسعد وفد بلادي الترحيب بمعالي السيد أنور محمد قرقاش وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية وبوفد دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة، ويشكره على العرض القيم. ولا يفوتنا أن نهنئ الإمارات على عضويتها في مجلس حقوق الإنسان من ثمن الإجراءات التي اتخذتها الإمارات من أجل تنفيذ التوصيات المقبولة خلال استعراضها الدوري الشامل في 2008، ونثني على إشراك المجتمع المدني في عملية إعداد هذا التقرير. إن مصادقة الإمارات على اتفاقية مناهضة التعذيب واتفاقية حقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة وإبداء استعدادها للانضمام إلى البروتوكولين الاختيارين الأول والثاني لاتفاقية حقوق الطفل ودراسة إمكانية إقامة هيئة وطنية لحقوق الإنسان لهو تأكيد على التزامها بتعزيز حقوق الإنسان وحمايتها. استرعى اهتمامنا السياسات التي وضعتها حكومة الإمارات العربية المتحدة من أجل كفالة التمتع بحقوق الإنسان، خاصة الاقتصادية والاجتماعية والثقافية، لا سيما تلك المتعلقة بحماية حقوق العمالة الوافدة، مكافحة الاتجار بالبشر وترقية المرأة. كما لا يفوتنا الإشادة بدور الإمارات العربية المتحدة في دعم جهود التنمية في الدول الأخرى من خلال مساعداتها الهامة في تنمية البنى التحتية وتحقيق الأمن الغذائي وإعمال الحق في التربية وفي الرعاية الصحية. نود تقديم توصيتين التاليتين: 1. بذل جهود إضافية لتحسين تقديم تقارير دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة إلى هيئات معاهدات حقوق الإنسان التي صادقت عليها. ثانيا الاستمرار في الخطوات الرامية إلى إنشاء هيئة وطنية لحقوق الإنسان. وفي الختام نتمنى لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة ولشعبها مزيدا من التقدم والازدهار. وشكرا سيد نائب الرئيس.
Je vous remercie. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Angola.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, la République d'Angola souhaite la bienvenue à la délégation des Émirats arabes unis à la 15e session de l'examen périodique universel conduite par Son Excellence Dr Anwar Mohamed Gargash, ministre d'État des Affaires étrangères. Monsieur le Président, depuis la présentation du dernier rapport au Conseil des droits de l'homme dans le cadre du premier cycle de l'EPU en 2008, les Émirats arabes unis ont adhéré à plusieurs instruments internationaux se rapportant aux droits de l'homme, notamment la Convention des Nations unies contre la torture et autres peines ou traitements cruels, inhumains ou dégradants, et à la Convention des Nations unies relative aux droits des personnes handicapées. La République d'Angola note avec satisfaction l'engagement des Émirats arabes unis en faveur de la protection et la promotion des droits des femmes, illustrée par l'augmentation du nombre des femmes au sein des portefeuilles ministériels, dans le corps diplomatique, le corps de justice, en tant que magistrat, et au sein de la police et l'armée nationale. Monsieur le Président, nous aimerions recommander aux Émirats arabes unis de continuer les efforts en matière de la participation des femmes dans les instances de prise de décision et dans toutes les sphères de la société. En conclusion, notre délégation souhaite les vœux de pleine réussite à l'examen périodique universel à la République des Émirats arabes unis. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. Je passe la parole au distingué représentant d'Argentine. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. En primer lugar, queremos dar la bienvenida a la delegación de Emiratos Árabes, encabezada por su ministro de Estado de Relaciones Exteriores, el señor Anwar Mohamed Gargash, y agradecerles por la presentación de su informe. La Argentina desea saludar y felicitar a Emiratos Árabes por el establecimiento de un centro de protección de la infancia en el Ministerio del Interior, así como por la creación de un comité de lucha contra el delito de trata de personas. Nos congratulamos igualmente por la ratificación de la Convención contra la Tortura y otros tratos y penas crueles, inhumanos y degradantes. Nuestra delegación desea formular las siguientes recomendaciones. Primero, continuar con los esfuerzos para ratificar la Convención Internacional para la Protección de todas las personas contra las desapariciones forzadas. Segundo, eliminar de su sistema penal el castigo corporal y la pena de muerte. Tercero, la Argentina se permite recomendar a Emiratos Árabes la derogación de la criminalización de las relaciones sexuales entre personas del mismo sexo. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant du Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Mr. President. Liechtenstein welcomes the distinguished delegation of the United Arab Emirates and thanks for the valuable information provided in the introductory statement and in the national report. We note with concern that stakeholders report that corporal punishment of children is lawful within the family and as a sentence for crime in the penal system. We recommend that the UAE take legislative measures to explicitly ban corporal punishment in all settings, including the home and penal institutions, set up effective complaints mechanisms and provide training in the identification, reporting and management of cases of ill treatment to teachers, law enforcement and health professionals. As to equality of women, Liechtenstein recommends, like many delegations have already done, that the UAE ensure that women have full access to justice, obtain equal legal capacity and are treated equally in courts. Furthermore, we recommend that the UAE reform its legislation with a view to providing women with equal rights in marriage, divorce, property relations, the custody of children and inheritance. As regards international justice, Liechtenstein recommends that the UAE ratify the Rome Statute of the ICC in its 2010 version, including the amendments on the crime of aggression, and review its national legislation in order to ensure full alignment with the statute. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie et je passe maintenant la parole au distingué représentant d'Afghanistan. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président.
My delegation warmly welcomed the high-level delegation of the United Arab Emirates headed by the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Dr. Anwar Mohammed Gargash, and appreciate the comprehensive presentation of the excellent national report. Afghanistan commends United Arab Emirates' effort to implement the recommendations it accepted during the first cycle of the UPR. We are encouraged by the recent constitutional amendment and federal acts reflected in the report and took note and look forward to their implementation. We welcome the establishment of a set of the national policies and strategy to promote and ensure the enjoyment of the fundamental human rights and freedom. We are glad to see the United Arab Emirates had exceeded major international human rights instruments, notably the United Nations Convention Against Torture and the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Person with Disability. Finally, we welcome United Arab Emirates' contribution to developing country, and we would like to make the following recommendation. 1, to continue making contribution by providing support to developing country in order to improve the enjoyment of the human rights and these countries. Second, to continue to support initiative program and fund aimed at supporting youth projects in order to enhance the enjoyment of the economic rights and provide job opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, Excellence. Et je donne finalement la parole au distingué représentant de Corée.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Korea welcomes recent developments with respect to the governmental bodies through the setting up of various units charged with the promotion and protection of human rights. We are also pleased to note that Emirates Vision 2021 as a long-term national strategy gives priorities to the improvement of education, health and housing services, as well as the development of rural areas. We expect it to be implemented faithfully as planned. The Republic of Korea notes with satisfaction the various efforts by the UAE with respect to the establishment of national human rights institution and recommend that such an institution be created in conformity with the Paris Principles. The Republic of Korea welcomes written ratification of CRPD and CAT and recommend that the UAE take in serious consideration the ratification of other core human rights treaties, especially those of the ICCPR and ICSCR. The Republic of Korea welcomes written achievements in the area of anti-discrimination against women and recommend that government continue its effort to correct the discriminatory practice and institutions against women throughout the whole society, and that it take active measures to reduce social elements that could contribute to acquiescence or passivity with regard to domestic violence, as demonstrated in UPR report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous avons épuisé la liste des orateurs et toutes les interventions seront postées sur la page extranet de l'examen périodique universel. Je donne à présent la parole à Son Excellence, M. Anwar Mohammed Gargash, pour ses conclusions. Excellence, je vous en prie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I've listened to all of the world, 90 countries, and I have to say that it is very important for us to understand through this process what is important and where we should improve our own record, and the coming period will definitely see us work along this line. I would like to, prior to my concluding remarks, I would like to start with a couple of important items that were raised. With regards to HIV, we have a decision by the Cabinet in 2010 to upgrade our national program on combating HIV, but our national program also, in sort of its modernization, addresses various issues that are important in this area. And this is basically to improve the lives of those who suffer from this illness. It ensures their right to be admitted into educational institutions. It ensures their right to work. It gives them also financial and social support and creates the mechanism to do that. And in this, I think we are in line with various international recommendations, and this is an important area for us. So in this modernization, we seek that the person who suffers from this illness is able to be more productive in his society, more positive, and for society not to isolate him. And I think this is something that we are working on and updating and upgrading, I think, our process in this field. Furthermore, with regards to our legal system, by various parties, it has been seen in its transparency, has been rated by various international indicators as first in the region, in the Arab region, and 13th in the world with regards to the transparency of the legal system. So rest assured, we are very proud of our legal system, and rest assured, our legal system will see to it that things are done according to the legal framework that we have. I would like to take this opportunity again to thank everybody here for their comments, for their contributions, and I could see some underlying themes that I'm going to address here. But before that, I would like actually to thank the Chair for the patience and perseverance and time management, which I think has been done in a very sort of business-like and judicial way. Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity also to thank the Troika, Germany, Thailand, and Ethiopia, a very diverse and responsible Troika, and thank you very much for their role in making this happen. I would like to say that our own process in the UPR has benefited our civil society and has benefited our also government institutions. We have gone through a 2-year process to prepare for this day. This process has included basically a study of where our gaps are, where our commitments are, and it has included a dialogue. It has included a dialogue with various government departments, the Interior Ministry, Labor Ministry, Health Ministry, Education Ministry, the Human Trafficking Body, and various Justice Ministry, and various bodies in the UAE. In the process itself, I think we have built capacity, which is extremely important. So we have really started a journey 2 years ago that has taken all the institutions together, and with the institutions, of course, various civil society organizations in the UAE. More than 130 civil society organizations were asked the questions and provided the answers, and many of them played an important and dynamic role in this process. This included 2 major dialogues, one of them which was hosted in 2010 by the Human Rights Committee in the United Arab Emirates. And I think what emerged out of all this is a record of a nation that I am not going to say is exemplary, and I'm not going to say is ideal, but I think is a very positive record, and a nation that you can see clearly is realistic in that it has to improve many areas in its civil rights, in its human rights record, and has done so. But of course the journey is a long one, and we need to continue on this path, and we need to also take on board what we will get as conclusions from this assessment, and also improve our record in the process. I'm not surprised that labor is a major issue. I think for the next many years, the UAE will deal with the labor issue, will seek to improve that, and will be asked by friends and by colleagues to improve that record. And I think this is a dynamic process. We have, I think, listened to what we heard in 2008, and we have improved significantly and substantially, and I think we will listen this time also to what has been approached from the labor perspective, and I think we will improve. And this is, as I said, will be work in progress. I think on women, our record is very strong, and I think it is the strongest record in any other Arab country today. And I think that what we see today in the Arab world is a reversal and regression in the rights of women in many countries. Many countries, even that are seeking revolution, there is a lot of fear about a regression on the record of women. And I think the UAE stands very tall on this record of women, and I think we are very consistent, and we are intent on supporting that record and making it work, because we believe that how well we do on women reflects clearly on our socio-economic environment, and reflects clearly on many other areas. And I would say confidently that the UAE today holds the most progressive record on women in the Arab world and in the region. We have a progressive record. We have a progressive record on minority rights. We have a progressive record on religious tolerance. We have a progressive record on accepting various communities to live in harmony and do well in our country. And I think this is the essence of the society that we want to keep. And part of it also is to develop also our political participation process, which we have sought to gradually and in an evolutionary way proceed with it since 2006. And we intend to defend this, we intend to work on it, we intend to improve it, and we intend to also fight against extremist agendas to try and undermine this record with a very sort of regressive and conservative approach, especially towards women and tolerance and accepting of the others. Again, we do also have limitations in what we do, and I think a large part of our limitations is our own culture and our own religious framework. And I think in many ways, like many other Arab countries, our laws have to basically be in sync with our religion and in culture. This is the nature, I think, of the development in Arab and Islamic societies. I think it should be understood by others that no certain notion can be superimposed or pre-imposed on an Arab and Muslim society, and an Arab and Muslim society are being asked in inheritance laws and whatever to try and superimpose a different culture. I think other cultures will not accept that we take our open-minded and Islamic religious culture and superimpose them on their own culture, and I think it is only right and fair that this is not done in the reverse. I conclude by saying that the UAE record is a strong one, is a positive one, but I am the first one to admit that it is not ideal and that it is not exemplary, but it is definitely right there in the forefront in the region, and we need to defend it. Again, I would like to thank you all for your effort, thank the Secretariat, thank the whole the UPR process, and conclude by asking everybody to join us in a reception that we have outside. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Je remercie son Excellence et sa délégation pour leur présentation et leur participation à cet examen. Le rapport de l'examen sera à présent préparé par les membres de la Troïka, c'est-à-dire l'Éthiopie, l'Allemagne et la Thaïlande. Le rapport sera distribué le mercredi 30 janvier à 18 h et adopté le jeudi 31 janvier après 16h30. Nous nous retrouvons demain matin à 10 h pour l'adoption des rapports du Burundi, du Luxembourg et de la Barbade. La réunion est close.
Thank you very much.